The moment Daniel Brooks locked eyes with his CEO across that wedding reception, he knew his carefully constructed life was about to shatter. A single father, his boss, one forbidden night that would set their world on fire. This is a story about risking everything when you've already lost it all once before. Stay with me until the very end of this journey. It gets intense, it gets raw, and I promise you won't see the twists coming. And when you do reach that final moment, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. Now let's begin where it all started to unravel. The October wind carried the scent of salt water and expensive perfume through the open terrace doors of the Harborview estate, where 200 guests celebrated a love story that wasn't his. Daniel Brooks stood at the edge of the crowd, nursing a whiskey he didn't really want, watching couples sway to music that made his chest ache with memories he'd spent 3 years trying to forget. He shouldn't have come. Every instinct had screamed at him to decline the invitation, to stay home with Emma, to avoid exactly this kind of evening where happiness felt like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. But Marcus, his college roommate, his best man once upon a lifetime ago, had insisted with that particular brand of stubborn affection that made saying no impossible. "You need this, man," Marcus had said over the phone 2 weeks earlier. "One night. Just be Daniel again, not just Emma's dad. Not just the guy who works too hard and sleeps too little. Come celebrate with us. Please." So here he was, wearing a suit that still fit but felt foreign, surrounded by strangers who seemed to possess some secret knowledge about joy that he'd misplaced somewhere between divorce papers and custody arrangements. The bride, Marcus's younger sister Jen, had walked down the aisle 3 hours ago with the kind of radiant certainty that made Daniel remember standing at his own altar, believing forever was a promise people actually kept. He'd smiled through the ceremony, applauded at the right moments, made small talk during cocktail hour about his daughter's upcoming 7th birthday, his work at Catalyst Digital, the weather. All the safe topics that kept people from asking the questions that mattered. Are you okay? Are you lonely? Do you ever wake up at 3 in the morning and wonder if this is really all there is? The answer to all three was complicated. Daniel checked his phone for the 4th time in an hour. The babysitter, a responsible college student named Riley who lived in his building, had sent a photo 20 minutes ago. Emma asleep in her bed, clutching the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 2. The image made his heart contract with equal parts love and guilt. He'd tucked her in at 6:30, kissed her forehead, promised he'd be home before she woke up. "You look like a man planning his escape." The voice came from behind him, low and amused, and Daniel's entire body went rigid before his brain caught up to recognition. He turned slowly, already knowing what he'd find, but somehow still unprepared for the reality of it. Victoria Hale stood 3 feet away, holding a glass of red wine, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in the severe bun she wore to executive meetings. She was wearing a forest green dress that moved like water, nothing like the sharp blazers and tailored pants that announced her authority in every boardroom at Catalyst Digital. For a moment, Daniel forgot how to form words. This was his CEO, the woman who'd hired him 2 years ago after a presentation that had apparently shown actual strategic thinking instead of the usual marketing bullshit. The executive who commanded a company of 300 employees with the kind of calm, devastating competence that made competitors nervous and investors eager. And she was here, at this wedding, looking at him like he was a person instead of an employee number and a quarterly performance review. "Miss Hale," he managed, his voice coming out rougher than intended. I didn't know you'd be here." "Victoria," she corrected, that small smile still playing at the corners of her mouth. "We're not in the office, Daniel, and Jen is my goddaughter. I've known her since she was 8 years old and thought being a veterinarian meant you only worked with horses." Of course she was. The world was smaller than it had any right to be, and Daniel's carefully compartmentalized life was apparently determined to collapse all its walls in a single evening. "Right," he said. "Of course, you just thought your boss spent every waking moment terrorizing product managers and reviewing profit margins." Her eyebrow arched, teasing. "I do have a life outside of quarterly earnings calls, you know." Daniel felt heat creep up his neck. "That's not what I meant." "I know." Her expression softened. "You look uncomfortable. First wedding since your divorce?" The question was direct but not unkind. delivered with the same straightforward honesty she brought to every interaction. Victoria Hale didn't deal in euphemisms or polite deflection. It was one of the things Daniel respected most about her leadership, and one of the things that occasionally terrified his colleagues. Second, he admitted, but the first one was a destination thing in Napa. I flew in and out the same day. This felt more real. Because you can't escape? Because I'm actually here, he said quietly. Present, sober, watching people believe in something I'm not sure exists anymore. Victoria's eyes, sharp and brown and impossibly perceptive, studied him for a long moment. Then she took a sip of her wine and said, "Walk with me." It wasn't a question or a request. It was the same tone she used in meetings when she'd made a decision and expected the world to align itself accordingly. Daniel found himself following before his brain registered the choice, trailing her through the crowd of chattering guests toward the terrace that overlooked the harbor. The October air hit him like a baptism, cold and sharp and necessary. String lights swayed overhead, casting moving shadows across the wooden deck. Below, boats bobbed in their slips, their masts creating a forest of vertical lines against the darkening sky. The music from inside became muffled, distant, as if they'd stepped into a pocket of the world that existed outside normal time. "You have a daughter," Victoria said, leaning against the railing. It wasn't a question. She knew this, of course. It was in his employee file, had come up in casual conversation during his interview, was the reason he never stayed late for drinks with the team. "Emma, she's 6, almost 7. And tonight she's with a babysitter while you fulfill your social obligations to a college friend you probably haven't seen in months." Daniel huffed a laugh despite himself. Brutal but accurate. "I'm not criticizing. I'm observing." Victoria turned to face him fully, her hip against the railing, wine glass cradled in both hands. "You know what I see when I look at you, Daniel?" His heart kicked against his ribs. "What?" "Someone who's convinced himself that wanting anything for himself makes him selfish." She tilted her head, considering. "You're good at your work." "Excellent, actually. Your campaign for the Jensen account last quarter was the best strategic thinking I've seen in years. But you never advocate for yourself, never push for the promotion you deserve, never take credit when it's due." "I just do my job." "You do everyone else's job, too. I've seen you stay late to help junior team members fix their presentations. I've watched you volunteer for the projects no one else wants. You're the first to arrive and the last to leave, except when you have to pick up your daughter." She paused. "Why?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Daniel wasn't ready to examine. The truth was complicated and messy and probably not appropriate to share with his CEO on a terrace at a wedding where the champagne was flowing and the boundaries of professional conduct felt dangerously thin. But something about the way Victoria was looking at him, not as his boss, but as a person who genuinely wanted to understand, made the words come anyway. "Because if I work hard enough, maybe I can prove I'm not the failure my ex-wife thinks I am," he said quietly. "Because if I'm useful enough, valuable enough, maybe I can create the stability for Emma that I couldn't create in my marriage. Because if I keep moving, keep producing, keep being indispensable, maybe I won't have time to think about how lonely I am." The confession hung between them like something physical. Daniel immediately wanted to take it back, to laugh it off, to make some joke that would deflate the raw honesty he'd just spilled into the space between them. But Victoria didn't look shocked or uncomfortable. She looked sad, understanding. "I know that playbook," she said softly. "I wrote the first draft. You're the CEO of a successful tech company. You command a board full of venture capitalists who wanted to replace you with someone more experienced, their code for mail. And you made them all shut up by doubling revenue in 18 months. You have nothing to prove." "Don't I?" Her smile was rueful. "I'm 41 years old, Daniel. I run a company I built from nothing. I have a penthouse apartment with a view of the entire city and enough money to buy whatever I want. And you want to know what I did last Saturday night?" He waited. "I sat on my couch with takeout Chinese food and rewatched the entire first season of a show I'd already seen 3 times, alone. Because the thought of going out, of making small talk, of pretending I'm not exhausted from being Victoria Hale all the time," she trailed off. "Sometimes success looks a lot like isolation." Daniel had never heard her talk like this, had never imagined she could. In the office, Victoria was a force of nature, brilliant, demanding, occasionally intimidating in her certainty. But here, with the wind pulling strands of hair across her face and the string lights casting soft shadows, she looked almost vulnerable. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know." "How could you? We all wear our armor to work. Mine's just more expensive than most." She took another sip of wine. "But you asked me earlier why I'm here. The truth? Jen's wedding was the first event in 6 months where someone wanted me there because they actually like me, not because they need something from me. It felt important to show up for that." The music inside swelled, some romantic ballad that made the couples on the dance floor press closer together. Through the glass doors, Daniel could see Marcus spinning Jen in a circle, both of them laughing, her white dress fanning out like a flower blooming. "They look happy," Victoria observed. "They look certain." "Is that the same thing?" Daniel considered. "I used to think so. Now I'm not sure." "Tell me about your marriage." Another direct question, delivered with that same unflinching honesty. "If you want to." He shouldn't. This was his CEO, his boss, the person who signed his paychecks and determined his career trajectory. Every professional instinct screamed at him to deflect, to change the subject, to maintain the appropriate distance between their positions in the company hierarchy. But the whiskey was warm in his blood, and the night felt suspended outside normal rules, and something about Victoria's presence made him want to be honest in a way he hadn't been in years. "Her name was Sarah," he began. "We met in college, got married at 25 because that's what you did when you were in love and had decent jobs waiting. I thought we wanted the same things. Turned out we wanted the same Instagram aesthetic, which is not remotely the same thing." Victoria's lips quirked. "Brutal but accurate?" "Brutal but accurate," he confirmed. She wanted the life that looked good from the outside. The house in the right neighborhood, the dinner parties with the right people, the husband who made enough money but not too much, who was successful enough to be impressive but not so demanding that he took attention away from her social climbing. "And you wanted?" "Something real. Something that mattered. I wanted to build things, create things, make work that meant something. She wanted me to take a corporate job with a title that sounded good at cocktail parties. We fought about it for 3 years before Emma was born." "And after?" Daniel's grip tightened on his glass. "After, things got worse. Sarah was a good mother, I'll give her that. She loved Emma fiercely, but motherhood wasn't enough for her. She needed the validation of being the perfect parent with the perfect house and the perfect family. Every moment had to be documented, curated, shared. Emma's first steps, her first words, her first day of preschool, all of it became content for Sarah's social media persona." "That sounds exhausting." It was, for all of us. Emma started having anxiety at 4 years old because she could feel the pressure to perform, to be the perfect daughter in the perfect pictures. I begged Sarah to pull back, to let our daughter just be a kid. She said I didn't understand how important it was to build our brand. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Our brand. Like we were a product instead of a family. When did it end? When Emma was 3, Sarah sat me down and said she'd met someone else. A VP at a pharmaceutical company. Better salary, better title, better house. She wanted a divorce so she could pursue her happiness. The bitterness in his voice surprised him. She got primary custody because she had the bigger house in the better school district. I get Emma every other weekend and Wednesday nights. Sometimes more if Sarah's schedule is too full. Victoria's expression had gone very still. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's been 3 years. Emma's happy. He trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence honestly. "Surviving," Victoria supplied gently. "Yeah, surviving." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of shared understanding settling between them. Then Victoria said something that made Daniel's breath catch. "I was engaged once, 12 years ago." He turned to look at her fully. "What happened?" "He wanted me to choose, him or the company. He said he couldn't compete with my ambition, that I cared more about quarterly reports than building a life together. He gave me an ultimatum: scale back, delegate more, become the kind of partner who was home for dinner every night. Or he walked." "And you chose the company." "I chose myself," she corrected. "I chose the thing I'd built with my own hands, the vision I'd fought for, the work that actually meant something." He couldn't understand that my company wasn't in competition with him. It was part of who I was. Um, that asking me to shrink myself to fit into his idea of an acceptable partner was asking me to cut out a piece of my soul. Do you regret it? Victoria's smile was complicated. I regret that he couldn't see me clearly enough to love all of me. I don't regret refusing to diminish myself to make someone else comfortable. The music changed inside, something upbeat and joyful that made the guests cheer. Through the windows, Daniel could see people flooding onto the dance floor, filling the space with movement and laughter. The celebration was reaching its peak, that moment in every wedding where the formality dissolved into pure joy. We should go back, Victoria said, but she didn't move. Yeah, Daniel agreed, also not moving. The moment stretched. Something was happening here on this terrace. Something Daniel didn't have a name for but could feel in the way the air seemed charged between them. This was dangerous territory. She was his boss. He was a single father with a daughter who needed stability more than she needed another person cycling through her life. They worked together. There were rules, boundaries, professional standards of conduct. And yet, I notice you, Victoria said suddenly, her voice low enough that he had to lean in to hear. At work, I notice how you listen to people, really listen, instead of just waiting for your turn to talk. I notice how you always have time to help someone struggling with a project, even when you're drowning in your own deadlines. I notice that you never speak up in meetings just to hear yourself talk, only when you have something worth saying. Daniel's heart was hammering now. Victoria, I notice you, she repeated, holding his gaze, and I have for months, maybe longer, but you're on my team and I'm your CEO, and there are rules about these things for good reasons, so I've kept it to myself, kept it professional, kept my distance. Why are you telling me this now? Because tonight you're not my employee. You're a man at a wedding, talking to a woman at a wedding, and for once, we're just two people who are tired of being alone. She set her wine glass on the railing. Because I'm 41 years old and I've spent the last decade telling myself that success is enough, that building something meaningful is worth the loneliness. And maybe it is. But standing here talking to you like this, I'm remembering what it feels like to want something that doesn't fit on a quarterly report. The confession hung between them like a live wire. Daniel knew he should step back, should say something about professional boundaries and appropriate conduct and all the very good reasons why this couldn't happen. Should think about Emma, about his job, about the careful stability he'd built for both of them. Instead, he said, I look for you. In the mornings when I get to the office, I find reasons to walk past your floor even when I don't have meetings there. I stay late sometimes just hoping I might run into you in the parking garage. And I hate myself for it because you're my boss and I have no right to... Daniel! She said his name like a full sentence. Stop. Stop what? Stop telling yourself you don't have the right to want things. Stop apologizing for being human. Stop. The door behind them burst open, and a group of laughing guests spilled onto the terrace, shattering the moment like glass. Victoria stepped back smoothly, her expression shifting so quickly into polite neutrality that Daniel almost wondered if he'd imagined the last 5 minutes. She picked up her wine glass and gave him a small, professional smile. We should get back to the reception, she said, her CEO voice firmly in place. I promised Jen I'd make a toast before dinner. Right, of course. But as they turned to go inside, she brushed past him, a movement that could have been accidental, except for the way her hand grazed his for just a second, a touch so brief it barely registered but left his skin burning. Inside, the coordinator was calling everyone to their seats for dinner. Daniel found his place card at a table near the back, surrounded by Marcus's college friends and their significant others. He was the only single person at the table, a fact that became immediately apparent when the conversations turned to vacation plans and home renovations and all the small domestic details that came with coupled life. He smiled, nodded, answered questions about Emma, pretended to listen while his mind was still on that terrace, replaying every word Victoria had said, trying to decode the meaning beneath the meaning. I notice you. The salad course arrived. The best man gave a speech full of inside jokes that made half the room laugh and the other half look confused. Someone's drunk aunt started crying during the maid of honor's toast. Normal wedding chaos, normal wedding joy, all of it washing over Daniel like he was underwater. Then the coordinator announced a change in seating arrangements, apparently a last-minute adjustment to balance the tables. Daniel felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up to find Victoria standing there, place card in hand. Mind if I join you? she asked, her tone perfectly casual, as if she hadn't just upended every professional boundary between them 20 minutes ago. Seems there was a mix-up with the seating chart. The couple next to him quickly made room, their eyes widening slightly at the arrival of someone who carried herself with such obvious authority. Victoria settled into the chair beside Daniel, smoothing her dress, and he caught the faintest hint of her perfume, something subtle and expensive that made his head spin. Interesting timing for a seating mix-up, he murmured under his breath. I'm friendly with the coordinator, she replied, equally quiet. She owed me a favor. You engineered this. I preferred the conversation on the terrace to the one I was having with a venture capitalist who wanted to mansplain my own company's metrics to me. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Sue me. The main course arrived, some kind of chicken with a sauce that probably had a French name Daniel couldn't pronounce. Around them, conversation swirled about the ceremony, the venue, the bride's dress. Victoria engaged just enough to be polite, asking questions and making comments that showed she was listening without dominating the discussion. But under the table, Daniel could feel the presence of her. The way she sat with her shoulders back, confident and comfortable in her own skin. The way she used her fork with precise, economical movements. The way she laughed at something the woman across from them said, her head tilting back just slightly. Your daughter, Victoria said during a lull in conversation, turning to him. Tell me about her. It was a test, Daniel realized. She wanted to see how he talked about the most important person in his life, whether he was the kind of father who saw his child as an obligation or a joy. Emma is, he smiled despite himself. She's everything, smart as hell, probably too smart for her own good sometimes. She asks about 1,000 questions a day and actually listens to the answers. Last week she informed me that octopuses have 3 hearts and asked if that meant they could love 3 times as much as humans. Victoria's expression softened. What did you tell her? I said I thought maybe hearts weren't about quantity, but about capacity, and that some people with just 1 heart could love more than seemed possible. He paused. Then she asked if I loved her more than an octopus would, and I told her I'd need at least 6 hearts to hold all the love I have for her. That's beautiful. She's beautiful. Not just physically, though she looks like her mother, but in the way she sees the world. Everything is still magical to her. She believes in fairness and kindness, and that people are generally good. I want her to keep that as long as possible. You're a good father, Victoria said quietly. I can tell. I'm trying to be. Some days I'm exhausted and impatient, and I feed her cereal for dinner because I can't face cooking. Some days I wonder if I'm screwing her up by being a divorced dad who works too much and doesn't know how to braid hair properly. But I'm trying. Trying is enough. More than enough, actually. She looked at him with an intensity that made his breath catch. Emma is lucky to have you. The dancing started after dinner. The DJ played the obligatory classics, songs that made older guests nostalgic and younger ones ironic. Marcus and Jen did their first dance to something slow and romantic, gazing at each other like they held all the answers to questions the rest of the world was still asking. Daniel watched from his seat, nursing another whiskey, feeling that familiar ache of witnessing other people's certainty. He'd had that once, had believed in forever and promises, and the idea that love was enough to build a life on, and then reality had taught him differently. Dance with me. He looked up to find Victoria standing beside him, hand extended, her expression unreadable. I don't think that's a good idea, he said carefully. Probably not, she agreed, but I'm asking anyway. The smart thing would be to decline, to maintain the professional distance that was already dangerously eroded, to remember that she was his boss and he was her employee, and this couldn't lead anywhere that didn't end in complications. But Daniel had spent 3 years being smart, being careful, building walls and maintaining boundaries and protecting himself from anything that might hurt his daughter or destabilize the fragile peace he'd constructed. And for what? To sit alone at weddings, watching other people dance? He took her hand. The dance floor was crowded with couples, all of them lost in their own worlds. The DJ had switched to something slower, jazzier, a song about longing and late nights and chances not taken. Victoria's hand settled on his shoulder. His hand found the small of her back. They moved together like they'd done this before, finding a rhythm that felt inevitable. This is wildly inappropriate, he murmured. Completely, she agreed, but she didn't pull away. They swayed in silence for a moment. Around them, other couples laughed and chatted, but Daniel was aware only of Victoria, the warmth of her hand in his, the way she fit against him like something designed for this exact purpose, the subtle scent of her perfume mixing with the October air drifting in from the open terrace doors. I meant what I said earlier, she said quietly, close enough that her breath ghosted across his ear. About noticing you. Victoria, I know all the reasons this is complicated. I know about power dynamics and professional ethics and HR policies. I know you have a daughter to think about and a career to protect. I know. Her hand tightened on his shoulder. But I also know that I'm tired of pretending I don't feel something when you walk into a room. Tired of editing my reactions. Tired of being professional and appropriate and careful all the damn time. Daniel's heart was racing. What are you saying? I'm saying that after tonight we go back to the office and we're boss and employee and we maintain all the appropriate boundaries. But tonight, she pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Tonight I'm just Victoria, and you're just Daniel, and I want to be honest about what I feel, even if we can't do anything about it. And what do you feel? The song was ending. Around them, couples were applauding, transitioning to partners for the next dance. But Victoria held his gaze, unflinching. I feel like I've been waiting for someone to see me. Really see me. Not the CEO or the success story or the woman who built a company from nothing. Just me. And you do. You see me. And it terrifies me how much I want to let you keep looking. The DJ started another song, something upbeat that broke the spell. People around them shifted, rearranged, found new partners. Victoria stepped back, putting professional distance between them again, but her eyes never left his. I should go, she said. Early meeting tomorrow. It's Saturday. Conference call with our London office. Time zones are ruthless. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Thank you for the dance, Daniel. She turned to leave, and he watched her go. This woman who commanded boardrooms and built companies and somehow still felt lonely enough to engineer a seating chart just to sit next to him at dinner. This woman who was his boss and completely off limits and absolutely the wrong person to develop feelings for. This woman who'd just told him she noticed him, who'd admitted she was tired of being careful, who'd danced with him like she was trying to memorize the feel of it. Victoria, he called after her, not caring who heard, not thinking about consequences. She stopped, turned back. I see you too, he said. And it terrifies me. But I see you. For a moment, just one crystalline moment, her careful control cracked, and he saw everything she was holding back, loneliness and longing, and the desperate hope that maybe, somehow, this impossible thing might be possible anyway. Then she smiled, small and sad and achingly beautiful, and walked away. Daniel stood on the dance floor as couples swirled around him, holding the memory of her hand in his, the scent of her perfume, the weight of words that couldn't be unsaid. He'd come to this wedding expecting nothing more than an obligation fulfilled, a night away from his normal life that he'd endure and forget. Instead, he'd had a conversation that felt like the beginning of something he didn't have a name for yet. Something dangerous, something real, something that was going to change everything, whether they wanted it to or not. The night wound down around him. Marcus found him an hour later, already drunk on champagne and happiness, and pulled him into a bear hug. You came, Marcus said, words slightly slurred. You actually came. I said I would. I know, but I wasn't sure you'd really show. You've been distant lately, since the divorce. I'm here, Daniel assured him, and I'm glad I came. Your sister looks happy. She is. We are. Life is good, man. Life is really good. Marcus swayed slightly. You'll find it again, you know, that thing, that happiness. You deserve it. Daniel thought about Victoria's hand in his, about the way she'd looked at him on the terrace, about all the very good reasons why pursuing this would be a disaster, and the one stubborn reason why he wanted to anyway. Maybe, he said. Maybe I will. He left the wedding at 11:30, earlier than most, but late enough to have fulfilled his obligation. The drive home took 20 minutes through quiet streets, past houses where other families were sleeping, other lives were being lived. Riley was dozing on his couch when he arrived. Some Netflix show paused on the TV. She was great, Riley reported, gathering her things. 2 stories, 1 bathroom negotiation, asleep by 8:30. No problems. Daniel paid her, added an extra 20 for the late hour, and locked the door behind her. The apartment felt especially quiet after the noise and music and chaos of the wedding. He checked on Emma, still asleep, elephant clutched tight, and stood in her doorway for a long moment, just watching her breathe. This was what mattered. This small person who trusted him completely, who needed him to be stable and present and careful, who deserved a father who didn't complicate their lives with bad decisions and inappropriate feelings for his boss. He should forget about tonight, about Victoria's confession on the terrace, about the way dancing with her had felt like coming home to a place he'd never been. Should go to bed and wake up tomorrow and return to the careful, controlled life he'd built where nothing hurt because nothing mattered enough to hurt. But as Daniel finally climbed into his own bed, exhausted and confused and more alive than he'd felt in years, he knew forgetting wasn't possible. Victoria had seen him, really seen him, and he'd seen her back. And that changed everything. Outside his window, the city hummed with late-night traffic and distant sirens and all the sounds of people living their complicated lives. Daniel lay in the darkness and thought about Victoria's smile, about her hand in his, about the impossible thing that had started tonight, whether they meant it to or not. Tomorrow they'd go back to being boss and employee, back to professional distance and appropriate conduct, back to the safe, careful boundaries that kept life manageable. But tonight had proven something Daniel had been trying to forget for 3 years. The heart doesn't care about careful. It doesn't care about appropriate. It doesn't care about all the very good reasons why something is impossible. The heart wants what it wants. And Daniel's heart, against all logic and reason, wanted Victoria Hale. The question now was what he was going to do about it. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of a reckoning. Daniel stood in the parking garage of Catalyst Digital at 7:45, coffee in hand, staring at the elevator that would take him to the 3rd floor where his desk waited, where Normal waited, where he was supposed to pretend that Saturday night hadn't happened. The elevator doors opened and Victoria stepped out, phone pressed to her ear, her expression all business. She wore a charcoal suit that screamed authority, her hair pulled back in that severe bun, her heels clicking against concrete with military precision. She glanced at him, one brief neutral acknowledgement, and walked past without breaking stride in her conversation. I don't care what the projections say, Richard. If we can't deliver on the timeline, we don't make the promise. Period. Get me revised estimates by noon. Just like that, she was gone. CEO Victoria. Untouchable. Professional. Not the woman who'd confessed she noticed him, who'd danced with him like she was trying to memorize the feeling, who'd looked at him with eyes that held everything she couldn't say. Daniel exhaled slowly and followed her into the building. The office hummed with its usual Monday energy, keyboards clacking, phones ringing, the espresso machine in the break room hissing out overpriced lattes. Daniel's team gathered for their morning stand-up at 8:30. He presented his updates on the Morrison campaign, fielded questions about timeline adjustments, assigned tasks for the week. Everything exactly as it should be, except he couldn't stop thinking about her hand in his. Earth to Daniel. Melissa, his project coordinator, waved a hand in front of his face. You still with us? Sorry, what? I asked if you want to review the client presentation before I send it out. Yes, right. Send it over and I'll take a look before lunch. Melissa studied him with the particular intensity of someone who'd worked with him long enough to read his moods. You okay? You seem distracted. Long weekend, he said, which was true enough. How was the wedding? Fine. Good. The usual wedding stuff. Meet anyone interesting? There was something teasing in her tone, and Daniel's stomach clenched. Just old college friends, he lied smoothly. Nothing exciting. The morning crawled by with excruciating slowness. Daniel reviewed presentations, responded to emails, joined a conference call about Q4 strategy. He didn't see Victoria, didn't hear from her, didn't cross paths with her in the hallway or the break room or anywhere else, which was fine, normal, expected. It shouldn't have felt like disappointment. At 11:30, his phone pinged with a calendar notification. Leadership meeting, 2 p.m., executive conference room, required attendance for all department heads and senior strategists. Daniel's heart kicked into a higher gear. Victoria would be there, leading the meeting, being professional and brilliant and completely untouchable. He could do this. He could sit in a conference room with her and act like nothing had changed, like he hadn't spent the entire weekend replaying their conversation, analyzing every word, wondering what it meant that she'd engineered a seating chart just to sit beside him. The meeting started exactly on time because Victoria Hale didn't tolerate tardiness. 15 people filled the executive conference room: department heads, senior strategists, the CFO, who always looked vaguely disapproving of everything. Daniel took a seat near the middle of the table, careful not to position himself anywhere that might seem significant. Victoria stood at the head of the table, a presentation pulled up on the massive screen behind her. She looked completely in command, utterly comfortable with the power she wielded. This was her domain, her kingdom. "Let's get started," she said, her voice carrying that particular edge of authority that made people sit up straighter. "Q3 results are in, and I want to walk through what worked, what didn't, and where we're headed for year-end." For 45 minutes, she commanded the room with the kind of strategic brilliance that had made Catalyst Digital one of the fastest-growing companies in the tech marketing space. She dissected data, challenged assumptions, pushed back on weak explanations. When the VP of Sales tried to spin mediocre numbers into a success story, she cut through his rhetoric with surgical precision. "These aren't bad numbers, Tom. They're acceptable numbers. But acceptable doesn't get us where we need to be. What's the actual plan to improve conversion rates by Q4? Tom stammered through a response that sounded like corporate word salad. Victoria listened with the patience of someone who'd heard it all before and wasn't impressed. "That's not a plan. That's a hope wrapped in buzzwords. I need concrete metrics and timeline. On my desk by Wednesday." Daniel watched her dismantle weak arguments and demand excellence with something close to awe. This was why he respected her leadership. Not because she was ruthless, but because she refused to accept mediocrity when she knew her team was capable of more. She pushed people to be better, not through cruelty, but through the simple expectation that they could rise to meet higher standards. "Daniel," her voice pulled him from his thoughts, "your Morrison campaign exceeded projections by 18%. Walk us through what made it successful." Everyone turned to look at him. Daniel's mouth went dry. This was standard meeting protocol. Victoria regularly called on people to share wins and losses. But having her attention on him, her eyes meeting his across the conference table, made his brain short-circuit for just a second. The key was understanding what Morrison's actual problem was versus what they said their problem was. He managed, finding his footing. "They came to us thinking they needed a social media refresh. But after digging into their customer data, we realized their issue was brand perception among millennials who associated them with their parents' generation. So instead of just updating their Instagram aesthetic, we created a campaign that repositioned their legacy as reliability without sacrificing innovation." "Show us," Victoria said. Daniel pulled up the campaign materials on his laptop, projecting them onto the screen. For the next 10 minutes, he walked the room through strategy, execution, and results. He could feel Victoria's attention on him, sharp and focused, and he forced himself to present to the entire room instead of just to her. When he finished, she nodded once. "This is the standard I'm talking about." Daniel didn't just execute a brief. He solved the actual problem. That's the difference between acceptable work and exceptional work. Questions? The CFO raised a hand. "What was the budget variance?" "Came in 3% under budget," Daniel answered. "We reallocated some of the planned influencer spend toward targeted content creation, which gave us better ROI. "Smart." Victoria's eyes held his for just a beat longer than necessary. "Good work." The meeting continued, moving through other departments and projects. Daniel tried to focus on the presentations, take notes, engage with the discussion, but he was hyper-aware of Victoria's presence at the head of the table, the way she tilted her head when listening carefully, the precise gestures she used when making a point, the rare smile that appeared when someone genuinely impressed her. At 3:30, she wrapped the meeting with characteristic efficiency. "That's all I have. Tom, remember, Wednesday deadline. Everyone else, keep pushing. We've got 7 weeks until year-end, and I want to finish strong." People gathered their laptops and notebooks, filing out with the kind of relieved energy that came from surviving a Victoria Hale leadership meeting. Daniel stood to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Daniel, stay back a moment." His heart lurched. Around them, the last few stragglers exited, chatting about deadlines and project timelines. The door clicked shut, and suddenly they were alone in the conference room with nothing but glass walls between them and the rest of the office. Victoria didn't speak immediately. She closed her laptop, gathered her notes, moved around the table with deliberate slowness. When she finally looked at him, her expression was carefully neutral. "Saturday night," she began. "Was a mistake," Daniel said quickly. "I understand. We both had too much to drink. It was an emotional environment. Things were said that probably shouldn't have been. We can forget it happened and move forward professionally." Victoria's eyebrow arched. "Is that what you want? To forget it happened?" "I'm saying what's appropriate." "I didn't ask what's appropriate. I asked what you want." The question hung between them like a challenge. Through the glass walls, Daniel could see people moving through the office, oblivious to the conversation happening in this fishbowl of a conference room. Anyone could glance over and see them talking, could speculate about what was being discussed. "What I want doesn't matter," he said carefully. "You're my boss. There are policies, rules, very good reasons why this can't—" "I had lunch with our head of HR this morning," Victoria interrupted. "Theoretical conversation about hypothetical scenarios involving workplace relationships and conflict of interest protocols." Daniel's breath caught. "Why would you do that?" "Because I needed to understand the actual policies instead of just assuming they were insurmountable obstacles." She moved closer, lowering her voice even though they were alone. "The company has clear guidelines. Relationships between employees aren't forbidden, but they must be disclosed to HR, and if there's a direct reporting relationship, organizational changes have to be made to eliminate conflicts of interest." "Organizational changes meaning what?" "Meaning one of us would need to move to a different department or reporting structure. No direct supervisor-subordinate relationship can exist between people who are romantically involved." The clinical language, romantically involved, sounded absurd applied to whatever this was between them. They danced once, had one intense conversation. Nothing had actually happened. And yet the way Victoria was looking at him made Daniel's pulse race. "This is insane," he said. "We barely know each other. We had a conversation at a wedding. That's not a basis for upending organizational charts and filing HR disclosures." "You're right," Victoria agreed. "It's not. Which is why I'm not suggesting we do anything right now. I'm simply gathering information about what the boundaries actually are versus what I assumed they were." "And what did you find out?" "That the obstacles are significant but not insurmountable. That the company's policies were designed to protect against abuse of power, not to prevent adults from making their own choices about their personal lives. And that if two people wanted to pursue something, there's a pathway to do it ethically." Daniel's head was spinning. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about Saturday night. Because I meant what I said on that terrace. Because I'm 41 years old and I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions." She paused. "And because I think you feel it too." "Of course I feel it," Daniel said, the words coming out rougher than intended. "You think I wanted to spend all weekend replaying our conversation? You think I wanted to walk into the office this morning wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing? You think I wanted to sit in this meeting watching you be brilliant and wondering what it would be like to—" He stopped himself, breathing hard. "To what?" Victoria pressed. "To kiss you," he admitted. "To really kiss you. Not at a wedding where it's just dancing and charged looks, but to actually see if this thing between us is real or just loneliness wrapped up in wedding music and too much whiskey." The silence that followed felt electric. Victoria's expression shifted, something soft and vulnerable breaking through her professional armor. "I think about that too," she said quietly. "This is a terrible idea." "Probably. You're my boss. I have a daughter. My life is complicated enough without adding workplace romance and power dynamic concerns." "I know. And you're still standing here telling me you researched HR policies." Victoria smiled, small and sad. "I'm standing here telling you that I refuse to make decisions based solely on fear, that I've spent too many years choosing safety over possibility, that maybe, this is worth the risk." Daniel wanted to close the distance between them, wanted to find out if kissing her would feel as inevitable as dancing with her had, wanted to stop being careful for once in his carefully constructed life. But they were standing in a glass-walled conference room in the middle of the workday where anyone could see them. And he had Emma to think about, and Victoria had a company to run, and there were 1,000 very good reasons why acting on this feeling would be reckless and stupid and dangerous. "I need time to think," he said finally. "Of course." Victoria's mask of professional composure slid back into place. "Take all the time you need, but Daniel?" "Yeah?" "Don't take so long that fear makes the decision for you." She left then, walking out of the conference room with her usual confident stride, leaving Daniel alone with his racing thoughts and the terrible, wonderful knowledge that this thing between them wasn't going away just because they wanted it to. The rest of the week passed in a strange limbo. Daniel saw Victoria in meetings, in the hallway, once in the parking garage as he was leaving for the day. Each encounter was professional, appropriate, entirely normal, and each one made him more aware of what they weren't saying, what they weren't doing, what hung suspended between them like a question waiting to be answered. Wednesday night, he picked Emma up from Sarah's house for his weekly overnight visit. His daughter bounced into his car full of stories about school and her friend Madison's birthday party and a boy named Tyler who ate glue during art class. "Daddy, why do boys eat glue?" she asked seriously, buckling her seatbelt. "I have no idea, sweetheart. Maybe they're conducting a scientific experiment on what things taste bad." "That's dumb." "Very dumb," he agreed. They stopped for pizza on the way home. Not fancy pizza, just the cheap place near his apartment that Emma loved because they gave kids free arcade tokens. She demolished 2 slices of pepperoni while explaining the complex social dynamics of first-grade recess politics. So Madison says she's having a princess party, but Ashley says princesses are for babies and we should have a science party instead. And I think both are good, but if we have a science party, can we make slime? Because I really want to make slime. Daniel listened, asked questions, marveled at how his daughter could make the creation of slime sound like a matter of international importance. This was what mattered. These small moments, this small person who trusted him completely. Later, after bath time and stories, and the elaborate bedtime routine that Emma had developed to delay sleep as long as possible, Daniel sat on the edge of her bed, watching her fight to keep her eyes open. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby?" "Are you happy?" The question startled him. "What do you mean?" "Mommy has Richard now. They go on dates and stuff. You don't go on dates. Don't you get lonely?" Daniel's heart contracted. His 6-year-old daughter shouldn't be worrying about whether he was lonely. She should be thinking about slime and princess parties and whether Tyler would eat glue again tomorrow. "I have you," he said gently. "That makes me pretty happy. But when I'm not here, like when I'm at Mommy's." He considered lying, giving her the easy answer that would make her stop worrying. But Emma was too smart for easy answers, and he'd always tried to be honest with her in age-appropriate ways. "Sometimes I get a little lonely," he admitted. "But that's okay. Grown-ups get lonely sometimes. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. Would you want a girlfriend, someone to not be lonely with? Maybe someday, if I met the right person." Emma's eyes were drifting closed despite her best efforts to stay awake. She should be nice and like slime and not think princesses are for babies. "Those are excellent criteria," Daniel said, smoothing her hair back. "I'll keep that in mind." "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, baby. So much." He sat there until her breathing deepened into sleep, then quietly left her room. The apartment felt especially empty in the wake of her presence. The living room scattered with her toys, her backpack dumped by the door, her laughter still echoing in the silence. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "It's Victoria. I got your number from the company directory. I hope that's not crossing a line." Daniel stared at the screen, his heart suddenly racing. This was crossing a line. Not a company policy line, but a personal boundary line. This was moving from workplace proximity to actual contact, from theoretical possibility to concrete action. He should probably not respond, should maintain professional distance, should think about Emma sleeping down the hall and the stable life he'd built for her and all the ways this could get complicated. Instead, he typed, "Not crossing a line. Hi." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "How was your evening?" "Pizza and first-grade drama." Emma wanted to know why boys eat glue. I had no good answers. "Because boys are weird at every age?" Daniel smiled despite himself. "Fair assessment. I'm having wine and pretending to review quarterly budgets, but mostly just drinking wine. Rough day, long day, lots of decisions, Lots of people wanting things. Sometimes I forget what it's like to just be a person instead of a position. Daniel sat down on his couch, phone in hand, feeling the familiar pull of wanting to know more about her. Not CEO Victoria, but the woman who drank wine alone on Wednesday nights and admitted she was tired. What would you be doing if you weren't reviewing budgets? Probably reading. There's a novel I started 3 months ago that I keep meaning to finish. What's it about? A woman who leaves her entire life behind to start over in a small town. Very escapist. Very unlike my actual life. Do you ever want to escape? The question felt too intimate for text message, but Daniel sent it anyway. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her response came through. Sometimes. Not from the company, I love what I've built, but from the performance of it, the constant need to project strength and certainty, the isolation that comes with leadership. Yes. Sometimes I want to escape that. Where would you go? Somewhere quiet, near water, where I could wake up without an alarm and spend entire days reading and thinking and not making a single important decision. That sounds perfect. It also sounds impossible, but it's nice to imagine. They texted back and forth for another hour, easy conversation that ranged from books to childhood memories to Emma's glue-eating classmate. Nothing heavy or fraught. Just 2 people getting to know each other the way people did when they were interested in more than surface pleasantries. Finally, around 11, Victoria sent, "I should let you go. Early meeting tomorrow." Yeah, me too. Daniel, yeah? I'm glad you responded. I wasn't sure you would. Me either, he admitted. Good night. Good night, Victoria. Daniel sat in the quiet of his apartment for a long time after that, phone in hand, thinking about the woman on the other end of these messages. The CEO, who confessed she wanted to escape. The person who was lonely, despite her success. The possibility wrapped in complications that made his careful life feel suddenly, dangerously insufficient. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth and a company-wide email announcing an all-staff happy hour at a bar 3 blocks from the office. Optional attendance, the email clarified, but Victoria Hale would be there and would love to connect with team members in a more casual setting. Daniel almost didn't go. Happy hours meant forced socialization and awkward small talk with colleagues he barely knew outside of project meetings. But Melissa cornered him at 4:30 with puppy dog eyes and promises that she'd buy the first round if he came. "Come on," she wheedled. "You never come to these things. It'll be fun. Plus, free appetizers." "I have to pick up Emma by 6. It starts at 5. Have 1 drink, eat some wings, leave early, live a little." So he went, telling himself it had nothing to do with the possibility of seeing Victoria outside the office again. Nothing to do with wanting to continue the conversation they'd started over text. Nothing to do with the way his heart rate increased whenever he thought about her smile. The bar was already crowded when he arrived. Clusters of Catalyst digital employees claiming tables and ordering drinks with the particular enthusiasm of people spending someone else's money. Daniel found Melissa and her team near the back, already 2 drinks deep and arguing about whether AI would replace marketing strategists within the next decade. "Daniel!" Melissa thrust a beer into his hand. "Settle this. Will robots take your job?" "Robots will make my job different," he said diplomatically. "But they can't replace the human element of understanding what actually motivates people." "See," Melissa crowed to her colleague, "human touch matters. Until they program empathy into the algorithms," the colleague countered. Daniel sipped his beer and let the conversation wash over him, only half listening. His attention kept drifting to the door, watching for Victoria's arrival. Would she come? Sometimes executives made token appearances at these things and left immediately. Sometimes they sent regrets at the last minute. She arrived at 5:20, and Daniel felt the moment like a physical thing. She changed out of her work blazer into something more casual, dark jeans and a soft cream sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. Her hair was still up, but looser, with pieces falling around her face. People noticed her immediately. A path seemed to clear as she moved through the bar, colleagues gravitating toward her with that particular mix of respect and nervousness that powerful people inspired. She smiled, shook hands, made small talk with the ease of someone who'd learned how to work a room. Their eyes met across the crowded space. For just a second, everything else fell away. The noise, the people, the performance they were both maintaining, just that look, that acknowledgement that something unspoken was happening between them. Then someone claimed her attention and the moment broke. Daniel turned back to his colleagues, trying to focus on their conversation about AI and marketing strategy. But he was hyper-aware of Victoria's presence, tracking her movement through the bar even as he pretended not to. "You okay?" Melissa asked, nudging his arm. "You seem distracted." "Fine. Just thinking about Emma's pickup time." "You've got 40 minutes. Relax." 20 minutes later, Daniel excused himself to the bathroom, navigating through the crowd. When he emerged, Victoria was standing near the hallway, apparently waiting for her own turn. They were alone for the first time since the conference room on Monday. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi yourself." "Good turnout." "People love free drinks." She smiled. Cynical, but accurate. A pause. "How's Emma?" "Good. Disappointed that her father can't explain the scientific reasoning behind glue consumption. Some mysteries have no good answers." They stood there in the narrow hallway, the noise from the bar muffled, close enough that Daniel could smell her perfume. The same scent from the wedding, the scent he'd been trying not to think about all week. "This is harder than I thought it would be," Victoria admitted quietly. "What is?" "Being around you and pretending I don't want to." She stopped herself, glancing toward the bar. "We should get back." "Victoria." She turned back, and the look on her face nearly undid him. Vulnerability and longing and restraint all tangled together. "I keep thinking about what you said," Daniel told her, "about not letting fear make the decision. And you're right. But I have Emma to consider, and you have a company to run. And maybe the smart thing is to just what? Ignore this? Pretend it'll go away?" She shook her head. "I've spent years being smart, Daniel, being careful, making all the right professional choices, and I'm successful and respected and completely alone. So forgive me if I'm not convinced that smart is the same thing as right." Before he could respond, voices approached from the bar, colleagues looking for the bathroom. Victoria stepped back, professional mask sliding into place, and Daniel watched her walk away feeling like he'd just lost something he'd never actually had. He left at 5:50, citing Emma's pickup time, and drove through rush-hour traffic thinking about Victoria's words. About fear and choices, and the difference between smart and right. About how lonely success could be. About whether he was brave enough to risk the carefully constructed stability he'd built for something as uncertain as this. His phone buzzed at a red light. Another text from Victoria. "I'm sorry for what I said in the hallway. That was inappropriate." "It wasn't," he typed back. "It was honest. Honesty feels dangerous." "Yeah, it does. Have a good weekend with Emma." "You too." "I mean, have a good weekend." "Not with Emma. You know what I mean." Her response came through with a laughing emoji, the first time she'd used one in their messages. "I know what you mean. Good night, Daniel." That weekend, Daniel did his best to be fully present with Emma. They made slime, which ended up all over his kitchen counter, went to the park, watched her favorite movie for the 100th time. She asked again about girlfriends, this time more directly. "If you met someone nice, would you bring her to my birthday party?" "That's 2 months away, baby. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." "But if you did meet someone, would she come?" "I don't know, maybe. Would you want her to?" Emma considered this with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice deliberating a major case, only if she's really nice and doesn't try to be my new mom, because I have a mom. "You do have a mom, and anyone I ever dated would never try to replace her." "Okay. Then I guess it would be okay." She paused. "Does she like slime?" Daniel laughed, pulling her into a hug. "I don't know yet, Emma. But if I meet someone, I'll make sure to ask about her slime preferences." Sunday night, dropping Emma back at Sarah's house, he lingered longer than usual. His ex-wife noticed, studying him with the particular intensity of someone who'd once known him well. "You look different," Sarah observed. "Different how?" "I don't know. Less tired, maybe. Or more alive. Something's changed." Daniel shrugged. "Just work stuff. New projects." She didn't sound convinced. "Well, whatever it is, keep doing it. You look better than you have in months." Driving home, Daniel thought about Sarah's observation. Something had changed. He felt it too. A restlessness, an awakening, a sense that the careful life he'd built might not be enough anymore. Victoria had done that. had reminded him that wanting something for himself didn't make him selfish, that loneliness wasn't something to just accept and endure, that maybe, just maybe, risk was worth it. Monday morning, Daniel arrived at the office to find an email waiting from HR. Subject line, Organizational Restructuring. Your input requested. His heart stopped. The email was professional, formal, requesting his availability for a meeting to discuss potential departmental realignments related to the company's growth trajectory. No mention of Victoria. No mention of relationships or conflicts of interest. Just standard corporate language about organizational optimization. But Daniel knew. Somehow, he knew. Victoria was moving pieces on a chessboard, creating pathways, eliminating obstacles, making it possible. Daniel read the email 3 times before his hands stopped shaking. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon with Patricia Chen, Catalyst Digital's head of HR, the same woman Victoria had mentioned having lunch with. The same conversation about hypothetical scenarios and conflict of interest protocols. This wasn't hypothetical anymore. He should have felt panicked, should have been calculating the risks to his career, his daughter's stability, the carefully balanced life he'd constructed. Instead, what he felt was something closer to relief, because Victoria wasn't just talking about possibilities anymore. She was creating them. His phone buzzed. A text from her, as if she'd sensed his thoughts across the 3 floors separating them. Did you get the HR email? Yes. And? Daniel stared at the question, understanding that his answer mattered, that this was Victoria giving him one more chance to walk away before things became irrevocable, one more opportunity to choose safety over uncertainty. And I think we should talk. In person. Not at the office. The 3 dots appeared immediately. Tonight, there's a coffee shop on Meridian Street. Quiet. Out of the way. What time? 7? I'll be there. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Daniel went through the motions of work, reviewed campaign analytics, participated in a strategy call, provided feedback on a junior team member's presentation. But his mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios, imagining conversations, trying to prepare for something that felt entirely unprecedented in his carefully controlled existence. At 6:30, he left the office and drove to Meridian Street, a neighborhood he barely knew on the opposite side of the city from both Catalyst Digital and his apartment. The coffee shop Victoria had chosen was exactly as she'd described. Quiet, tucked between a bookstore and a yoga studio, the kind of place where no one from their office would accidentally wander in. She was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee, still wearing her work clothes but with her blazer draped over the chair and her hair down. She looked up when he entered, and the expression on her face was equal parts nervous and determined. "Hi," she said as he approached. "Hi." He sat down across from her, accepting the coffee she pushed toward him. "Black? 2 sugars?" "You take it with cream at the office, but I've noticed you drink it black when you're stressed." The observation shouldn't have surprised him. Victoria noticed everything, but it still made his chest tighten. "You're right. I do." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down between them. Finally, Victoria spoke. "I need to be honest with you about something. The HR email you received, that wasn't coincidental timing." "I figured." "The company's been planning a restructuring for months. We've been growing faster than our organizational structure can handle, and several departments need realignment. It's legitimate. Necessary, actually." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "But when Patricia and I had lunch last week, I may have suggested that the marketing department would benefit from splitting senior strategy into its own unit, reporting directly to the CMO instead of through the general marketing director." "Which would mean I'd no longer report to you, even indirectly." "Exactly. It would eliminate the conflict of interest. You'd still be at Catalyst Digital, still doing the same work, but the reporting structure would be different." She met his eyes. "I'm not doing this to manipulate you, Daniel. The restructuring is happening regardless, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't thinking about us when I made the suggestion." Daniel processed this information, turning it over in his mind. "And if I go to this meeting with Patricia and say I'm not interested in the restructuring, that I want to stay in my current position? Then you stay in your current position. The restructuring happens around you, and we—" She trailed off. "We maintain professional distance and pretend this thing between us doesn't exist." "Yes." Is that what you want? Victoria's laugh was soft and humorless. What I want is complicated. I want you. I want to explore whatever this is between us without worrying about power dynamics and HR policies and what people will say. I want to have dinner with you that isn't group drinks at a bar. I want to text you without wondering if it's inappropriate. I want... She stopped herself, took a breath. But I also want you to make your own choice here, free from any pressure from me. Your career matters. Your daughter's stability matters. I won't be the person who disrupts that. You already have disrupted it, Daniel said quietly. The second you told me you noticed me, you disrupted everything. I can't unknow that now. Can't unfeel it. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. He leaned forward. But I need to understand something. What happens if we do this? If I take the restructuring and we eliminate the conflict of interest and we actually try to see where this goes, what does that look like? Victoria considered the question carefully. Honestly, I don't know. I've never done this before, gotten involved with someone from work. My last serious relationship ended 12 years ago, and since then I've been so focused on building the company that I convinced myself I didn't have time for anything else. So I don't have a roadmap here. Neither do I. My marriage failed, I've been single for 3 years, and I have a 6-year-old daughter who deserves stability more than she deserves me experimenting with my personal life. Then maybe we're both in over our heads. Maybe, Daniel agreed. Or maybe that's exactly why this could work. Because we both know what's at stake. Because we're both old enough to know that feelings aren't enough. You need compatibility and communication and a willingness to navigate complicated situations together. Victoria smiled, small and sad. When did you get so wise? Divorce is an excellent teacher. Forces you to figure out what actually matters versus what you just thought was supposed to matter. He paused. Emma asked me this weekend if I'd ever bring someone to her birthday party, if I met someone nice. What did you tell her? That I'd have to meet them first, that they'd need to like slime, that they couldn't try to replace her mother. He watched Victoria's expression carefully. She's not looking for a new parent, Victoria. She has 2 parents who love her. But I think she's intuitive enough to know that her dad is lonely, and she's generous enough to want me to be happy. She sounds like an amazing kid. She is, which is why I'm terrified of screwing this up, of bringing someone into her life and then having it fall apart, and her having to deal with more loss and instability. That's a reasonable fear. But, Daniel prompted, hearing the unspoken word in her tone, but life is inherently unstable, Daniel. You can't protect her from every potential loss. And modeling what it looks like to be brave enough to try for happiness, even when it's scary, that's not a terrible lesson either. The coffee shop around them had started to fill with the evening crowd. Students with laptops, couples on dates, a book club gathering in the corner. Normal people living normal lives, making normal choices. Daniel wondered if any of them were sitting across from their CEO, debating whether to upend their professional life for the possibility of something that might not even work out. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it carefully, deliberately, no rushing into anything. We take time to actually get to know each other outside of work context before we involve Emma or make any big decisions. Agreed. And if at any point it becomes clear this isn't working, we end it cleanly. No drama, no making things awkward at the office, no putting either of our careers at risk. Also agreed. And you have to be honest with me about the power dynamic thing. Because even if I'm not reporting to you directly anymore, you're still the CEO. You still have influence over my career trajectory. So if there's ever a moment where you're making a professional decision about me, and you're not sure if it's clean, you tell me. We talk about it. Complete transparency. Victoria nodded, her expression serious. Complete transparency. I promise. Daniel took a long drink of his coffee, feeling the weight of the decision settling over him. This was it. The moment where he either chose safety or possibility, where he either stayed in the careful, controlled life he'd built or took a chance on something uncertain. Okay, he said finally. Okay meaning what? Okay meaning I'll go to the HR meeting on Wednesday. I'll hear about the restructuring, and if it makes sense professionally, if it's genuinely a good move for my career independent of us, then I'll say yes. Victoria's eyes searched his face. And if you say yes to the restructuring, then I'd like to take you to dinner, somewhere nice, somewhere that's not a coffee shop where we're hiding from our coworkers. A real date. The smile that broke across her face was worth every moment of uncertainty. I'd like that too. They talked for another hour, the conversation shifting to easier topics, books they'd both read, movies they wanted to see, childhood memories that shaped who they'd become. Daniel learned that Victoria had grown up in a small town in Oregon, the daughter of two teachers who'd been baffled by their daughter's entrepreneurial ambitions, that she'd started her first business at 16, creating websites for local companies, and had known even then that she wanted to build something of her own. My parents couldn't understand it, she told him. They kept asking why I couldn't just get a stable job with benefits like a normal person. The idea of taking risks, of building something from nothing, it terrified them. But not you. It terrified me too, still does, honestly. But the alternative, spending my life being safe and small and unfulfilled, that terrified me more. Daniel thought about his own parents, who'd been quietly disappointed when his marriage fell apart, who'd suggested he should have tried harder, compromised more, been willing to sacrifice his own needs for the sake of preserving the family unit. They loved Emma fiercely, but had never quite forgiven him for the divorce, as if single parenthood was a personal failing rather than a reasonable response to an unhealthy relationship. My parents don't understand my choices either, he admitted. They think I should have stayed married for Emma's sake, that putting her through a divorce was selfish. Was it? Staying would have been worse. She would have grown up watching a marriage where her parents were miserable, where love looked like resentment and compromise looked like self-erasure. I didn't want that to be her model for relationships. That's brave. It didn't feel brave. It felt like the only option left after all the other options had been exhausted. Victoria reached across the table, her hand covering his. The touch was brief, careful, but it sent electricity through his nervous system. I should go, she said reluctantly. Early flight tomorrow. I'm spending 3 days in Boston meeting with potential investors. 3 days? Back Thursday night. She stood, gathering her blazer. Will you text me? After your meeting with Patricia? Of course. They walked out together, pausing on the sidewalk outside the coffee shop. The October evening had turned cold, and Victoria wrapped her blazer around herself, looking suddenly smaller and more vulnerable than she ever did in the office. Daniel? She said as he turned toward his car. Yeah? Thank you for being willing to try this, for not just dismissing it as too complicated or too risky. Thank you for seeing me, he said simply, for noticing, for being brave enough to say something. She smiled, then walked to her own car, and Daniel watched her go with the strange sensation that his life had just turned a corner he couldn't see around. Tomorrow he'd wake up and go to work and maintain professional distance. But Wednesday he'd sit in an HR meeting that would determine whether this impossible thing could actually become possible. And Thursday Victoria would come back from Boston, and maybe, just maybe, they'd have their first real date. The next 2 days passed in a blur of anticipation and second-guessing. Daniel threw himself into work, finishing the Morrison campaign's final deliverables and starting preliminary research for a new client in the healthcare space. He had dinner with Emma on Tuesday night, listening to her elaborate plan for a slime-making birthday party that would definitely stain his apartment permanently. We could make galaxy slime, she explained with the enthusiasm of a mad scientist. It has glitter and it's purple and blue and it's basically the best thing ever. Galaxy slime sounds messy. That's what makes it the best. Wednesday morning arrived with unseasonable rain, the kind of gray, persistent drizzle that made the city feel smaller and more intimate. Daniel wore his best suit to work, not because the HR meeting required it, but because he needed the armor of professional presentation. Needed to feel like he was making a business decision rather than a romantic one. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock. At 1:50, Daniel stood outside Patricia Chen's office, taking deep breaths and reminding himself that this was just a conversation about organizational structure. Just a normal business discussion. Daniel Brooks? Patricia opened her door with a warm smile. Come in, please. Can I get you coffee or water? Water would be great, thanks. Her office was neat and organized, decorated with family photos and a collection of succulents that somehow managed to thrive despite the artificial lighting. Patricia was in her mid-50s, known throughout the company for being both fair and uncompromising when it came to policy enforcement. So, she began, settling behind her desk, I wanted to talk to you about some organizational changes we're implementing, As you probably know, Catalyst Digital has experienced significant growth over the past 18 months, and our current structure is starting to show strain. I'd heard rumors about restructuring, Daniel said carefully. More than rumors, it's happening. We're splitting several departments to create more specialized units with clear reporting lines. Marketing is one of those departments. She pulled up an organizational chart on her computer. Currently, you report to Sarah Kim, who reports to the CMO, who reports to Victoria. We're proposing to create a new strategic marketing division that would report directly to the CMO, eliminating one layer of management. And I'd be part of this new division? We'd like you to lead it. The title would be Director of Strategic Marketing, with 3 senior strategists reporting to you. It's a promotion, Daniel. Comes with a salary increase and more autonomy over your projects. Daniel's heart raced. This wasn't just eliminating the conflict of interest with Victoria. This was a genuine career advancement, the kind of opportunity he'd been working toward for years. Can I ask why me? He said. There are other senior strategists who've been here longer. Patricia smiled. Because Victoria recommended you. And before you worry about favoritism, the recommendation went through a full committee review. Your Morrison campaign results, your leadership during the Jensen pitch, your mentorship of junior team members, all of it was evaluated. The committee agreed unanimously that you're the right person for this role. I see. There is one thing I need to disclose, however. Patricia's expression turned more serious. This restructuring does have an additional benefit beyond operational efficiency. It would eliminate any direct reporting relationship between you and Victoria Hale. Daniel's mouth went dry. I'm not sure I understand. I think you do. Victoria came to me several weeks ago with hypothetical questions about workplace relationship policies. I'm not stupid, Daniel. I've been in HR for 25 years. I can read between lines. She leaned forward. So let me be very clear. This promotion is based entirely on merit. The restructuring is based entirely on legitimate business needs. But if, hypothetically, you and Victoria were to develop a personal relationship, this new structure would ensure it complied with all company policies regarding conflicts of interest. And if I don't take the position, then someone else leads the strategic marketing division and you continue in your current role. No penalty, no judgment. But I will say this. If you're turning down a promotion because you're uncomfortable with the implications regarding Victoria, you should reconsider. This opportunity exists because you've earned it. What you do with the freedom it provides is up to you. Daniel sat back in his chair, processing. This was really happening. Victoria had created a pathway, but Patricia was right. The opportunity was real. He'd earned this promotion through his work, not through any personal connection. How long do I have to decide? He asked. Normally I'd give you a week, but the restructuring announcement is scheduled for Monday. I need an answer by Friday afternoon. Can I ask one more question? Of course. If I accept this position and later, hypothetically, began a relationship with Victoria, what would the disclosure process look like? Patricia pulled out a form. You'd both fill this out, indicating the nature of the relationship and confirming there's no direct reporting line. It gets filed with HR. As long as neither of you supervises the other and there's no preferential treatment in professional matters, the company doesn't have an issue with employees dating. We're not in the business of controlling people's personal lives. We're just committed to preventing abuse of power. That seems reasonable. It is reasonable. And Daniel, for what it's worth, I think Victoria could use someone who sees her as a person instead of just a CEO. She's brilliant and driven and absolutely terrifying in meetings, but she's also human. Sometimes I think people forget that. Daniel left the meeting feeling like he'd just crossed some invisible threshold. He walked back to his desk in a daze, sat down, and stared at his computer screen without really seeing it. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. She must have landed in Boston. How did it go? Good. Really good, actually. They offered me a promotion. Director of Strategic Marketing? You knew. I recommended you. But the committee made the final decision. Did you accept? Daniel stared at the question, his finger hovering over the keyboard. This was it. The moment where theory became reality, where possibility became choice. I asked Patricia for until Friday to decide. But I think you know what my answer will be. I don't want to assume. Then let me be clear. I'm saying yes. to the promotion, and to dinner with you when you get back. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her response came through. Thursday night. I'll text you when I land. It's a date. Yes, it is. Daniel set his phone down and allowed himself a moment to feel the full weight of what he'd just committed to. He was going to accept a promotion that would change his career trajectory. He was going to go on a date with his CEO. He was going to risk the stability he'd built for the possibility of something that might not work out. And somehow, despite all the very good reasons to be terrified, what he felt most was anticipation. Thursday evening, Daniel stood in front of his closet, trying to figure out what one wore to a first date with Victoria Hale. Everything felt either too casual or too formal, too much like trying too hard or not trying hard enough. Finally, he settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt, casual enough to be comfortable but nice enough to show he'd made an effort. Emma was at Sarah's for the week, which meant he didn't have to explain where he was going or navigate questions about whether this person liked slime. That conversation would come eventually, but not tonight. Tonight was just about seeing if this thing between them could translate from stolen moments and charged glances into actual compatibility. His phone buzzed at 6:30. Just landed. Meet me at Lucia's at 8? Lucia's was an Italian restaurant in the Arts District, known for excellent food and dim lighting and the kind of intimate atmosphere that suggested romance rather than business dinners. Daniel's heart kicked into a higher gear. I'll be there. He arrived 15 minutes early, too nervous to wait at home any longer. The restaurant was exactly as he'd imagined: soft lighting, exposed brick walls, tables spaced far enough apart for privacy. The host led him to a corner table, and he sat there feeling simultaneously excited and terrified. Victoria arrived exactly at 8, and Daniel's breath caught. She was wearing a dark blue dress, simple and elegant, her hair down in loose waves. She looked nothing like CEO Victoria, and everything like the woman who'd confessed on a terrace that she was tired of being lonely. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hi. How was Boston?" "Productive. Exhausting. The investors asked approximately 10,000 questions, and I spent 3 days explaining why our growth model is sustainable." She smiled. "But I don't want to talk about work tonight." "What do you want to talk about?" "You. Emma. What you're reading, what you're thinking, what you do on Sunday mornings when you don't have your daughter." She leaned forward. "I want to know the version of Daniel Brooks that doesn't exist in conference rooms and quarterly reports." The waiter appeared with menus and wine recommendations. They ordered, Victoria choosing pasta with truffle cream sauce, Daniel opting for the braised short ribs, and settled into the kind of conversation that felt both new and familiar. Daniel told her about his morning routine, the elaborate ritual of getting Emma ready for school when she was with him. She has opinions about everything: what she wears, what she eats, whether her hair gets brushed before or after breakfast. It's exhausting and hilarious, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. "You light up when you talk about her," Victoria observed. "She's the best thing I've ever done. The only thing I'm certain I got right." "I don't think that's true. You're exceptional at your work. Your team respects you. You've built something meaningful at Catalyst." "But Emma is different. Work is what I do. She's who I am." Victoria was quiet for a moment, turning her wine glass in her hands. "I envy that. Not the relationship itself. I chose not to have children, and I don't regret that choice. But the certainty. Knowing without question what matters most. You have that with your company." "Do I? Some days I think the company is just an elaborate construct I built to avoid having to answer harder questions about what I actually want from life." She met his eyes. "And before you think I'm having some kind of existential crisis, I'm not. I love what I've built. I'm proud of it. But lately I've been wondering if maybe there's supposed to be more. Something beyond quarterly earnings and investor presentations." The food arrived, interrupting the moment. They ate and talked and laughed, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Victoria told stories about her early days building Catalyst Digital, the failures and near disasters that had eventually led to success. Daniel shared memories of college, of meeting Sarah, and falling in love with the idea of who they could be together rather than who they actually were. "That's the trap, isn't it?" Victoria said. "Falling in love with potential instead of reality." "It is. Took me years and a divorce to learn that lesson." "And now? What are you looking for in reality rather than potential?" Daniel considered the question carefully. Someone who sees me clearly and chooses to stay anyway. Someone who understands that Emma comes first but doesn't resent that. Someone who has their own life and dreams and doesn't expect me to complete them, just compliment them. That's a mature answer. I'm a mature divorced dad. Comes with the territory. He paused. What about you? What are you looking for? Victoria smiled, soft and vulnerable in the candlelight. Someone who isn't intimidated by my success. Someone who can handle that. I work 70-hour weeks and care deeply about my company. Someone who sees the person underneath the CEO and wants both versions. And if I told you I want both versions, I'd say you barely know either version yet. We've had meaningful conversations and obvious chemistry, but we haven't done the hard work of seeing if we actually fit together in day-to-day life. Fair point. So what's the next step? More dates, more conversations, more discovering who we are when we're not performing for wedding guests or hiding from coworkers. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. I'm willing to put in the work if you are. I am, Daniel said, meaning it completely. They stayed at the restaurant until closing, talking until the waiter started pointedly clearing tables around them. Outside, the October night had turned cold and crisp, and they stood on the sidewalk not quite ready for the evening to end. I should go, Victoria said, but she didn't move. Yeah, Daniel agreed, also not moving. This was nice, really nice. It was. Can we do it again? Absolutely, Victoria smiled, then stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, the touch brief and sweet and full of promise. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Victoria. He watched her walk to her car, then drove home through empty streets, thinking about how normal the evening had felt. How easy, how right. They'd had dinner like two people getting to know each other, discovering compatibility, testing the waters of possibility. No drama, no complications, just two adults being honest about what they wanted and willing to see where it led. His phone buzzed as he pulled into his parking spot. I had a really good time tonight. Me too. Same time next week? It's a date. Friday morning, Daniel walked into Patricia Chen's office and accepted the promotion to Director of Strategic Marketing. The announcement went out Monday afternoon, along with the broader restructuring details. His team threw an impromptu celebration with grocery store cake and cheap champagne, everyone genuinely happy for his advancement. Victoria sent a company-wide email congratulating all the promoted employees, Daniel's name listed among 5 others. Professional. Appropriate. Giving no indication that she'd spent Thursday night having dinner with him, discovering that they both loved old mystery novels and hated running, but did it anyway. That became their pattern over the next 3 weeks. Twice a week, they'd meet for dinner at quiet restaurants across the city, places where they wouldn't run into colleagues or clients. They talked about everything. Childhoods and dreams and failures and fears. Daniel learned that Victoria had panic attacks sometimes before major presentations, that she'd gone to therapy for years to work through her relationship with success, that she still called her parents every Sunday, even though they didn't really understand her life. Victoria learned about Daniel's marriage, really learned about it, beyond the surface explanation he'd given at the wedding. She learned about Sarah's Instagram obsession, about the fights over money and priorities, about the final terrible 6 months when they'd barely spoken except to coordinate Emma's schedule. Do you still love her? Victoria asked one night over Thai food. No. But I don't hate her either. We're co-parents who want what's best for Emma. That's enough. That's mature. That's survival. Hating your ex when you share a kid just makes everything harder. They didn't talk about work unless one of them needed to vent about a particularly frustrating day. They kept their professional and personal lives carefully separated, neither wanting to contaminate the thing they were building with the complexity of their work relationship. And slowly, carefully, they fell into something that felt increasingly like a relationship. After their 6th date, sitting in Daniel's car outside her building, Victoria turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. I need to tell you something, she said. Daniel's heart clenched. Okay. I've been seeing someone, dating them, for almost a month now. He stared at her, confused and hurt, warring for dominance until he saw the smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That someone is you, you idiot, she said, laughing. And I think maybe it's time we stopped calling these getting to know each other dinners and acknowledged that we're actually in a relationship. Relief flooded through him. You scared me for a second. I know, I'm sorry. But my point stands. We've been dancing around this, being careful and deliberate and smart. And I appreciate that. But I also think maybe we're ready to call this what it is. And what is it? Something real, something worth protecting, something I want to keep building. She took his hand. I'm not ready to involve Emma yet. That needs more time and more certainty. But I'd like to acknowledge, at least between us, that this is more than just casual dating. Daniel brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. I agree. This is more. And I want to keep building it too. That night, they kissed for real for the first time. Not a brief touch goodbye, but a proper kiss that made Daniel's head spin and his heart race. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. Worth the wait, she murmured. Definitely worth the wait. As November arrived with its shorter days and colder nights, Daniel and Victoria navigated the delicate balance of keeping their relationship private while building it stronger. At work, they maintained professional distance, but outside the office, they were discovering the million small ways they fit together. Victoria's dry humor complementing Daniel's earnest sincerity, her ambition matching his dedication, her independence balancing his need for connection. It wasn't perfect. They had their first real argument 3 weeks in about something stupid, whether to see an action movie or a drama. The fight wasn't about the movie at all, of course. It was about compromise and control, and whether they could navigate disagreement without falling apart. They figured it out, talked it through, learned that they could fight without it being catastrophic. And Daniel started to believe that maybe, just maybe, this impossible thing might actually work. But belief, as Daniel was about to discover, was easier than reality. The cracks started showing in small ways, moments of tension that felt manageable until they accumulated into something heavier. The first real test came on a Tuesday morning in mid-November, when Daniel walked into the office to find the entire marketing floor buzzing with speculation. Melissa grabbed his arm the moment he stepped off the elevator. Did you hear? She whispered urgently, pulling him toward the break room. Hear what? Someone saw Victoria leaving a restaurant with a man last Thursday. Nice place in the Arts District. They were holding hands in the parking lot. Daniel's stomach dropped. Thursday. Lucia's. The same restaurant where they'd had their first date, where they'd returned twice more because the pasta was excellent and the corner table had become theirs. So? He said, forcing his voice to stay casual. She's allowed to have a personal life. I know, but people are talking, wondering who he is, whether it's serious. You know how this place gets with gossip. Melissa lowered her voice even further. Some people think it might be someone from the company. That's a pretty big leap from seeing her at a restaurant. I'm just telling you what people are saying, as your friend, because if there is something going on between her and someone here, it's going to get messy when it comes out. Daniel poured coffee he didn't want, his mind racing. They'd been so careful. Different restaurants each time, parking in different spots, never arriving or leaving together. But apparently careful wasn't careful enough. Thanks for the heads up, he managed. But I'm sure it's nothing. Victoria's personal life is her business. Melissa studied him with those two perceptive eyes. You'd tell me if something was going on, right? If you knew something? There's nothing to tell, he lied, hating how easily the words came. The lie sat heavy in his chest all morning. He avoided the marketing floor, buried himself in work, and tried not to think about how quickly rumors could spread through a company of 300 people. His phone stayed mercifully silent until 11:30, when a text from Victoria appeared. We need to talk. My office at noon? Daniel's heart sank. This was it. The moment where reality crashed into their carefully constructed bubble. He climbed the stairs to the executive floor, bypassing the elevator where he might run into colleagues, and knocked on Victoria's door exactly at noon. Come in. Her voice was clipped, professional. She was standing by the window, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The door clicked shut behind him, and suddenly the spacious office felt impossibly small. Someone saw us, she said without preamble. Thursday night, an employee from accounting was at the restaurant with her husband. She didn't recognize me immediately because my hair was down, but she figured it out over the weekend. I heard. The whole marketing floor is buzzing. It's not just marketing. I've had 3 separate people ask me about my date this morning. Very casual, very curious, very clearly fishing for information. She turned to face him fully. We need to make a decision, Daniel. Either we disclose the relationship to HR now, before the speculation gets worse, or we end this before it becomes a bigger problem. The words hit him like a physical blow. End this? We've been together for almost 2 months. We're good together. You're seriously suggesting we just throw that away because someone saw us at a restaurant? I'm suggesting we face reality. We knew this would be complicated. We knew there would be scrutiny. But I don't think either of us fully calculated what it would feel like to have our personal lives become office gossip. So we filed the disclosure form. Patricia said it was simple. We're not violating any policies. It's not about policies, it's about perception. Victoria's voice was strained. Do you know what people will say when they find out the CEO is dating someone who just got promoted? They'll say, I gave you the job because we're involved. They'll say you're sleeping your way to the top. They'll question every professional decision we've both made since the restructuring. Let them talk. We know the truth. The committee approved my promotion before we even went on our first date. And you think that matters? She laughed, bitter and tired. Daniel, I've spent 15 years building this company. 15 years proving I deserve to be taken seriously. Every single day I have to work twice as hard as my male counterparts just to maintain credibility. If this comes out wrong, if it looks like I'm playing favorites or mixing business with pleasure, it undermines everything I've built. Daniel felt anger rising in his chest, hot and unfamiliar. So what? I'm supposed to just be your secret? Someone you hide because acknowledging me might damage your reputation? That's not fair, isn't it? You're the one talking about ending things to avoid complications. You're the one worried about what people will think instead of just being honest about what we have. Because what we have exists in a professional context, whether we like it or not. We can't separate ourselves from the fact that I'm the CEO and you're a director in my company. That power dynamic exists regardless of how we feel about each other. Then maybe we should disclose it. Stop hiding. Let people think what they want to think and prove them wrong through our work. Victoria closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, Daniel saw something that looked like fear. I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't risk everything I've built on a relationship that's barely 2 months old. It's not rational. It's not fair to either of us. But it's where I am. The silence that followed felt like the end of something. Daniel stood there, looking at this woman he'd been falling for, and suddenly saw the unbridgeable gap between what they wanted and what they could actually have. She was right. The power dynamic was real. The professional complications were legitimate, but that didn't make her choice hurt any less. I should go, he said quietly. Daniel, no, you're right. This was always going to be complicated. I just thought... He trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. I thought maybe we were worth the complication, but if you don't feel the same way, then there's nothing more to say. He turned to leave, his hand on the doorknob, when her voice stopped him. I do think we're worth it. That's what makes this so hard. Daniel looked back at her, standing there by the window with the city spread out behind her, looking more alone than he'd ever seen her. Then fight for it. File the disclosure. Face the gossip. Trust that we can handle whatever comes. I don't know if I can. Then I guess we have our answer. He left her office feeling like he'd just lost something precious before he'd fully understood its value. The afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and emails and forced normalcy. He smiled when appropriate, contributed to discussions, maintained the professional facade he'd perfected over years of hiding his real feelings behind corporate politeness. That night, alone in his apartment with Emma at Sarah's, Daniel sat on his couch and let himself feel the full weight of what had just happened. 2 months. 2 months of careful dates and meaningful conversations and slowly falling for someone who apparently wasn't willing to fall back the same way. Or maybe she was willing, but not brave enough. His phone buzzed around 9 o'clock. A text from Victoria. I'm sorry. I'm a coward. You deserve better. He stared at the message for a long time before responding. You're not a coward. You're scared. There's a difference. Is there? Cowards run away. You're trying to protect something you built. I understand that. I don't agree with the choice, but I understand it. I don't want to lose you. Then don't push me away. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her next message came through. Can we talk? In person? Not at the office. When? Now? I'm outside your building. Daniel's heart lurched. He looked down at his sweatpants and t-shirt, at the apartment that hadn't been cleaned in a week, at the life he'd been so carefully protecting from exactly this kind of emotional chaos. Then he texted back a single word: apartment 4B. 3 minutes later, there was a knock on his door. Victoria stood in the hallway, looking nothing like the polished CEO from earlier. Hair messy from the wind, no makeup, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater that made her look younger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. "Hi," she said. "Hi. Can I come in?" Daniel stepped aside and she entered his apartment for the first time, taking in the lived-in space with its kid toys scattered in corners and Emma's drawings covering the refrigerator. He watched her see his real life, not the professional version he brought to the office, but the actual, messy, complicated reality of single fatherhood. "I've been sitting in my car for 20 minutes trying to figure out what to say," Victoria began, still standing in the middle of his living room like she wasn't sure she belonged there. "And I keep coming back to the same thing. I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of this. Of us. Of wanting something this much and then losing it. Of failing at something that matters." She finally looked at him. "I told you my fiancé left me 12 years ago because I chose the company over our relationship. What I didn't tell you is that I've spent every day since then convincing myself that was the right choice, that relationships are distractions, that building something meaningful professionally is enough to fill a life. And now? Now I'm not sure it is enough. Now I'm sitting at my desk trying to focus on quarterly projections, and all I can think about is whether you're still angry with me, whether I just destroyed something real because I was too scared to fight for it." She moved closer. "You were right. I am scared. I'm scared that people will question my competence if they know I'm dating someone from my company. I'm scared that this will blow up and hurt both our careers. But mostly, I'm scared that if I let myself care about you completely, if I actually commit to this, it will fall apart like everything else, and I'll be left with nothing." Daniel felt his anger dissolving, replaced by understanding. "You won't have nothing. You'll still have your company, your success, everything you built. But I won't have you, and somewhere over the last 2 months, that started to matter more than it should." More than it should? Victoria, relationships are supposed to matter. People are supposed to matter. You can't build a life entirely on professional achievement and expect to not feel empty. I know that intellectually, but feeling it is different, scarier. She sat down on his couch, deflating slightly. "I went home after you left my office, sat in my expensive apartment with my expensive view, and realized I couldn't remember the last time someone had actually been there. Not for business, not for a brief drink before an event. Just been there. With me. Because they wanted to." Daniel sat down beside her, close but not touching. "So what do you want to do? Because I can't keep existing in this limbo where we're together but also not together. Where you want me but won't claim me. I have Emma to think about. I can't bring instability into her life. I want to file the disclosure tomorrow. I want to stop hiding. I want to deal with whatever gossip comes and trust that we're strong enough to handle it. Are you sure? Because once we do this, there's no going back. Everyone will know. There will be questions and speculation and probably some uncomfortable conversations. I'm sure. Or at least I'm sure that losing you because I was too scared to try is worse than facing whatever professional complications come from being honest." She turned to face him fully. "But I need you to understand something. I can't promise this will be easy. I can't promise people won't talk or that there won't be difficult moments. All I can promise is that I'm willing to try, to fight for this, to trust that what we have is worth the risk." Daniel reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "That's all I'm asking for. Not guarantees, just willingness to try. I'm also going to need you to be patient with me. I've spent 12 years keeping people at arm's length. Learning to let someone in again, really in, that's going to take work. I can be patient. And I need to meet Emma. Not tomorrow, not rushed, but soon. Because if we're doing this for real, I need to know if I can be part of both your lives, not just the adult version that exists when she's with her mother." The request made Daniel's chest tighten, but it was the right request, the necessary one. "Okay, but we go slow with that. She's 6 years old, and she's already been through one major family disruption. I won't introduce someone into her life unless I'm certain they're staying." "Fair. And I won't ask to meet her until you're certain. They sat there in silence for a moment, hands linked, feeling the weight of the commitment they were making. This wasn't just about filing a form with HR or dealing with office gossip. This was about genuinely trying to build something together despite all the very real obstacles in their way. "Stay tonight," Daniel said quietly. "Not for anything more than just being here. I just don't want you to leave yet." Victoria smiled, soft and grateful. "I'd like that." They made tea, Daniel discovering that Victoria liked honey instead of sugar, and talked until past midnight. She asked about his daily routine with Emma, wanting to understand the rhythms of his parenting life. He asked about her company, really asked, wanting to understand the dream she'd built and why it mattered so much. They were learning each other's actual lives instead of the edited versions they presented at dinner dates. Around 1 a.m, Victoria fell asleep on his couch, her head against his shoulder, and Daniel sat there feeling the weight and warmth of her presence. This was real. Messy and complicated and imperfect, but real. The next morning, they filed the disclosure form together in Patricia Chen's office. Patricia read it over, nodded once, and filed it away with brisk efficiency. "Congratulations," she said. "You're officially in compliance with company policy. Now comes the hard part, dealing with everyone else's opinions." "We're ready," Victoria said, though Daniel could hear the uncertainty beneath her confident tone. "Good. Because I guarantee you'll be the topic of break room speculation by lunchtime." She was right. By noon, the entire company seemed to know that Victoria Hale and Daniel Brooks were in a relationship. The gossip spread through Catalyst Digital like wildfire, whispered in hallways, discussed over coffee, analyzed in group chats. Daniel felt eyes on him every time he walked through the office, heard conversations die when he approached. The marketing floor was the worst. Melissa cornered him in the break room with wide eyes and barely contained excitement. "You and Victoria? Daniel, how long has this been going on? Why didn't you tell me?" "It's new and private. I didn't tell you because there was nothing to tell until we were sure it was something worth talking about." "But you just got promoted. People are saying, I'll say, let me stop you there," Daniel interrupted, his voice firm. "My promotion was based on merit. It was approved by a committee before Victoria and I went on our first date. If people want to speculate otherwise, that's their problem, not mine." Melissa bit her lip. "I believe you, but you know not everyone will." "I know, and I'm okay with that." Victoria faced worse. In her afternoon leadership meeting, the CFO made a pointed comment about the importance of maintaining professional objectivity in personnel decisions. One of the board members sent an email questioning whether the relationship created any conflicts of interest that needed additional oversight. A blog that covered tech industry news picked up the story, publishing a piece titled "Catalyst Digital CEO Goes Public with Office Romance." Through it all, Victoria maintained her composure with the same steel-spined grace she brought to every challenge. She addressed the board members' concerns directly, walking through the committee process that had approved Daniel's promotion and explaining the restructuring that eliminated any direct reporting relationship. She sent a company-wide email acknowledging the relationship and reiterating Catalyst Digital's policies around workplace dating. "I understand this may be a topic of curiosity," she wrote. "However, I trust this team to maintain professionalism and focus on the work that matters. My personal life does not change my commitment to this company or my expectations for excellence from all of us." By the end of the week, the initial frenzy had started to die down. People were still curious, still watching, but the raw speculation had given way to something closer to acceptance. Daniel and Victoria maintained careful boundaries at work. No public displays of affection, no preferential treatment, no mixing of professional and personal matters. But outside the office, they continued building what they'd started. Friday night, Victoria came to his apartment and they cooked dinner together, or tried to, resulting in slightly burned chicken and perfectly decent vegetables. They laughed about Victoria's terrible knife skills and Daniel's tendency to add too much salt to everything. "I should warn you," Victoria said as they cleaned up the disaster of a kitchen. "I'm not very domestic. I can run a company, but I can't cook to save my life." "Good thing I can cook. Badly, but competently. We make quite a pair. Terrible at cooking, good at everything else." "Are we good at everything else?" She kissed him then, soft and certain. "We're getting there." The following Wednesday, Daniel picked Emma up from school for their weekly overnight visit. His daughter bounced into the car full of her usual energy, chattering about a science project on volcanoes that required baking soda and food coloring. "Can we do it tonight, Daddy? Please? Madison's already started hers, and I don't want to be behind." "Sure, baby. We'll stop at the store and get supplies." They made the volcano that evening, Emma narrating every step with scientific enthusiasm, while red food coloring erupted all over Daniel's kitchen table. He watched his daughter's face light up with joy and felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Love mixed with the weight of responsibility, joy tangled with fear of failing her. Later, after she'd fallen asleep clutching her elephant, Daniel sat on the couch and thought about Victoria. About the conversation they'd had about meeting Emma. About whether he was ready for that step. Whether Emma was ready. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "How's the volcano project?" "Messy. Successful. Emma's already planning her presentation. She sounds amazing. She is. Are you still okay with me meeting her? Eventually?" "No pressure, just checking." Daniel stared at the question, his heart racing. This was the moment. The point where careful dating became something more serious. Where Victoria would have to see not just him, but his entire complicated life. Where Emma would have to accept another person in her father's life. "I think I'm ready, but I want to do it carefully. Maybe just a casual meeting first. See how they interact. Whatever you think is best. I'm following your lead on this. Sunday afternoon? We usually go to the park. You could accidentally run into us. That feels slightly dishonest." "Fine. Sunday afternoon at the park, planned meeting, very casual, no pressure. I'll be there." Sunday arrived cold and bright, the kind of November day that made the bare trees look like art against the blue sky. Daniel and Emma arrived at the park at 2 o'clock, and Emma immediately ran for the swings while Daniel claimed their usual bench. His stomach was twisted in knots despite his outward calm. Victoria appeared 15 minutes later, wearing jeans and a casual jacket, her hair in a ponytail. She looked young and nervous and nothing like the CEO who commanded boardrooms. "Hi," she said, sitting beside him on the bench. "Hi, thanks for coming." "Thanks for inviting me. I'm terrified for what it's worth." "That makes two of us." Emma noticed them talking and wandered over, curious about the stranger on their bench. She studied Victoria with the frank, assessing gaze that only children could pull off without being rude. "Who are you?" Emma asked directly. "I'm Victoria. I work with your dad." "Are you his friend?" Victoria glanced at Daniel, uncertain how to answer. He gave a small nod of encouragement. "Yes, I'm his friend." Emma seemed to accept this. "Do you like swings?" "I used to. Haven't been on one in years." "You should come swing with me. Daddy never swings. He says he gets dizzy." Victoria laughed, surprised and delighted. "Sure, I'll swing with you." Daniel watched them walk to the swings together, his daughter chattering away about school and volcanoes and her elaborate birthday party plans, Victoria listening with genuine interest and asking questions. They pumped their legs in sync, going higher and higher, and Emma's laughter rang out across the park. Something in Daniel's chest loosened. This could work. Maybe it could actually work. An hour later, they got hot chocolate from a vendor, and Emma declared that Victoria was pretty nice for someone who works in an office. They walked through the park together, Emma between them, occasionally reaching for Daniel's hand, but comfortable enough with Victoria's presence to include her in the conversation. "Do you like slime?" Emma asked Victoria seriously. "I've never made slime, but it sounds fun." "It's the best. We made galaxy slime last month, and it was so sparkly." She paused. "Maybe we could make some together sometime, if you want?" Victoria's eyes met Daniel's over Emma's head, asking permission. He nodded slightly. "I'd like that," Victoria said. "If your dad says it's okay." "Daddy always says yes to slime. He's a good dad like that." The endorsement was simple and absolute, and Daniel felt tears prick his eyes unexpectedly. Emma thought he was a good dad. Despite the divorce, despite the complicated custody arrangement, despite all his fears that he was failing her, she thought he was good. They walked Emma back to the car as the sun started to set, painting the sky in oranges and purples. Emma gave Victoria an impromptu hug before climbing into her car seat. "Bye, Victoria. Thanks for swinging with me." "Bye, Emma. Thanks for letting me join your park day." Daniel drove Emma home, listening to her chatter about how Victoria was nice and had good swing technique, and asked interesting questions about volcanoes. When they got home, as he was making dinner, Emma looked up at him with those two perceptive eyes. "Daddy, is Victoria your girlfriend?" Daniel's heart stopped. "Would that be okay with you? If she was?" Emma considered this seriously. "Is she nice to you?" "Very nice." "Does she make you happy?" "She does." "Then I think it's okay. As long as she doesn't try to replace mommy, because I already have a mommy." "She would never try to replace your mom, baby. Never." "Okay then. I like her. She's good at swings." And just like that, with the simple logic of a 6-year-old, Emma gave her blessing. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel texted Victoria. "She likes you. She asked if you were my girlfriend." "What did you tell her?" "I asked if that would be okay with her. She said yes, as long as you're nice to me and don't try to replace her mother." "I would never. And I am nice to you. Mostly." "Mostly?" "I made you try that terrible sushi last week. That wasn't very nice." "Fair point. But overall, I'd say you're good to me." "Good enough to be your girlfriend officially?" "I think so. If you want the job." "I want the job." Daniel smiled at his phone, feeling something settle in his chest. They were doing this, really doing this, building something real despite all the complications and fears and obstacles. It wouldn't be easy. There would still be gossip at work, still be challenges navigating the relationship while maintaining professional boundaries, still be moments where the pressure felt overwhelming, but they were trying, together. And maybe, Daniel thought as he finally climbed into bed, that was enough. Not perfect, not easy, but real and honest and worth fighting for. Outside his window, the city hummed with life, other people's stories unfolding in the darkness. And inside, two lives were slowly weaving together into something new, something complicated and imperfect and absolutely worth every risk they'd taken to find it. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both extraordinary and wonderfully ordinary. Victoria became a regular presence in Daniel's life. Not every day, not overwhelming Emma's routine, but consistent enough that her absence felt notable. She came to dinner on Tuesday nights when Emma was with Daniel, helping with homework she was hilariously overqualified to assist with. She joined them for Saturday morning pancakes, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, while Emma explained the complex social hierarchy of first grade with the gravity of a political analyst. At work, they maintained careful professionalism. The gossip had faded to background noise, replaced by grudging acceptance and eventually something close to normality. Daniel's team stopped whispering when he walked by. Victoria's board stopped sending pointed emails about conflicts of interest. The company adjusted to the reality of their relationship the way organizations always did, with initial resistance followed by eventual adaptation. But adaptation didn't mean absence of challenge. The real test came in early December, during the week leading up to Emma's 7th birthday party. Daniel had planned everything meticulously, a slime-making extravaganza at his apartment with 12 7-year-olds, enough supervision to prevent total chaos, and a backup plan involving his neighbor who'd agreed to help corral children if things got out of hand. Sarah had approved the guest list, contributed money for supplies, and promised to pick Emma up by 6 o'clock. Victoria had asked, carefully, if she should attend. "I don't want to overstep," she'd said over dinner the week before. "It's Emma's party. Sarah will be there. If you think it's too much too soon, I understand completely." Daniel had thought about it, really thought about it. Victoria had been part of their lives for almost 3 months now. Emma adored her, particularly after Victoria had proven surprisingly adept at making glitter slime that didn't immediately turn into a sticky disaster. But a birthday party meant other parents, meant Sarah seeing them together, meant publicly claiming this relationship in front of the people who populated Emma's everyday life. "I want you there," he'd said finally. "But I need to tell Sarah first. She deserves to hear about us directly, not find out at Emma's birthday party." So on Wednesday evening, he'd driven to Sarah's house for an awkward conversation over coffee, while Emma played in her room upstairs. Sarah had listened with her usual composed expression, asking careful questions about how long they'd been dating, whether it was serious, how Emma felt about it. "She likes Victoria," Daniel had explained. "They get along well. Victoria's good with her, respectful of boundaries, never tries to replace you, just present, kind. Sarah had studied him for a long moment. You look happy, happier than I've seen you in years. I am happy. Then I'm glad. Emma deserves to see her father happy, and if Victoria makes you happy, if she's good to both of you, then I have no objections. She'd paused. Though I reserve the right to be protective if that ever changes. Fair enough. Is she coming to the party? If you're okay with it. Sarah had smiled, small and genuine. I'm okay with it. Emma talks about her constantly. Victoria says this, Victoria thinks that. Victoria makes the best galaxy slime. I'd like to meet the woman who's apparently become such an important person to my daughter. So Victoria came to the party, arriving early to help set up while Emma was still at school. She and Daniel transformed his apartment into a slime laboratory, covering every surface with plastic tablecloths and laying out supplies with military precision. When the doorbell rang at 2 o'clock with the first arrival, Victoria squeezed his hand once, a brief touch of solidarity, and then stepped back to let him handle the parent small talk. The party was controlled chaos. 12 7-year-olds making slime was exactly as messy as expected, with glitter ending up in places Daniel would probably still be finding it months from now. Victoria moved through the chaos with surprising ease, helping kids who couldn't get their slime to the right consistency, mediating disputes over who got which color, praising every sticky creation like it was a work of art. Sarah arrived at 4:30, exactly on schedule, and Daniel watched her take in the scene. Victoria kneeling on the floor next to Emma, both of them laughing as they added more glitter to an already excessive amount of sparkle. You must be Victoria, Sarah said, extending her hand. I'm Sarah, Emma's mom. Victoria stood, accepting the handshake with professional grace that somehow didn't feel cold. It's nice to meet you. Emma talks about you all the time. You're clearly doing an amazing job raising a pretty incredible kid. Sarah's expression softened. We both are. Daniel's a good father. The best, Victoria agreed, and the sincerity in her voice made Daniel's chest tight. The two women talked for a few minutes. Polite conversation about Emma's school progress, her upcoming recital, the logistics of the holidays. Daniel watched them navigate the inherently awkward situation with more grace than he dared hope for. Two people who loved the same child finding common ground despite the complicated history. As the party wound down and parents collected their sugar-high children, Emma ran to Sarah with stories about the party's highlights. Then she grabbed Victoria's hand and pulled her over too. Mommy, Victoria helped me make the best slime ever. It's purple and blue and has so much glitter. I saw, baby. It's beautiful. Can Victoria come to my recital next week? She said she's never seen a dance recital before. The question hung in the air, and Daniel watched Sarah process it. This was the moment, the point where Emma's two worlds fully merged, where Victoria would either be welcomed into the family ecosystem or kept at polite distance. Sarah looked at Victoria, then at Daniel, then at Emma's hopeful face. If Victoria wants to come, and if she's free, then of course she can come. Emma cheered, and Victoria's smile was grateful and slightly overwhelmed. I'd love to, thank you. After everyone had left and the apartment looked like a glitter bomb had exploded, Daniel and Victoria sat on the couch, surrounded by slime-making debris, exhausted and happy. That went well, Victoria said. Better than well. Sarah likes you, or at least doesn't hate you, which in divorced parent dynamics is basically the same thing. Emma's amazing. You and Sarah should be proud. We are. He pulled her closer, kissing her temple. Thank you for being here, for being good with her, for not running away when you saw what chaos a children's birthday party actually involves. Why would I run away? This is your life. If I want to be with you, this comes with the package. Besides, I kind of enjoyed it. The chaos has a certain charm. Daniel laughed. You're either lying or slightly insane. Maybe both. But the success of the birthday party brought its own complications. Because now that Sarah knew about Victoria, now that Emma had fully embraced her presence, the relationship felt more permanent, more real. And with that reality came questions neither of them had fully addressed. The conversation happened 2 weeks later, on a Friday night after Emma had gone to bed. Victoria had stayed over, something that had become more frequent as their relationship deepened. They were in Daniel's kitchen cleaning up dinner when she said, almost casually, I've been thinking about the future. Daniel's hand stilled in the soapy water. What about it? About us. Where this is going, what we both want long term. She dried a plate with careful attention. We've been together for almost 4 months now. It's going well, really well. But we've been so focused on navigating the present that we haven't talked much about the future. What do you want to talk about? Victoria set down the dish towel, turning to face him. I want to know if you see this as something temporary or something that could be permanent. I want to know what your expectations are for how this relationship evolves. I want to know if... She paused. If you can see a future where I'm not just your girlfriend, but actually part of your family. Daniel dried his hands slowly, buying time to formulate a response. I can see that. A future where you're part of our family, where Emma knows you're not going anywhere, where we build something lasting together. But I need to be honest about what that means. I have Emma. She will always be my first priority. Any future we build has to work for her, not just for us. And I'm a package deal. You don't just get me, you get school drop-offs and custody schedules and co-parenting dynamics with my ex-wife. I know that. I'm not asking you to choose between us. I would never ask that. I know you wouldn't, but I need you to really think about whether you want that life. You're the CEO of a successful company. You work 70-hour weeks. You travel constantly. You have flexibility and freedom that would disappear if you fully committed to being part of a family with a 7-year-old. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. Can I be honest about something? Something that might sound selfish? Please. I've spent 15 years building my company, sacrificing everything else for that goal, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. But lately I've been wondering if maybe I've been using work as an excuse not to build a personal life, not to be vulnerable, not to risk caring about something I can't control through strategic planning and hard work. That's not selfish, that's self-aware. The thing is, being with you and Emma has shown me what I've been missing. The chaos and mess and unpredictability of actually having people in my life who matter more than quarterly projections. And yes, it's complicated. Yes, it requires me to adjust my priorities. But I'm starting to think that's exactly what I need. Not a distraction from work, but a reminder that work isn't everything. Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her close. I need you to be sure, because if we do this, if we really commit to building a future together, it's not something we can just undo if it gets hard. Emma's already attached to you. If you walk away now, it would hurt her. And I can handle my own heartbreak, but I will not let my daughter go through that. I'm sure, or as sure as anyone can be about something that involves other human beings and their feelings. She pulled back to look at him. But I need something from you too. What? I need you to trust that I'm capable of being more than just the CEO, that I can learn to balance work and personal life, that I can be present for Emma without losing myself in the process. You keep talking about your priorities and your daughter and your complicated life, but you never ask what I need. What would make this work for me too? The observation hit him hard. She was right. He'd been so focused on protecting Emma that he hadn't fully considered what Victoria needed to make this relationship sustainable. You're right. I'm sorry. What do you need? I need you to let me figure out how to be part of this family in my own way. I'll never be Emma's mother. I don't want to be. But I can be someone who loves her and supports her and is there for the important moments. I need you to trust that I can do that without instruction or management. I can do that. And I need us to make time for just us. Not just family time with Emma, but actual couple time where we're building our relationship independent of parenting. Because if we're going to last, we need to be more than just co-conspirators in raising a child. We need to be partners. Also fair. And I need you to believe that I'm not going to run away when things get difficult. I know my track record isn't great. I've spent 12 years choosing work over relationships, but I'm choosing differently now. I'm choosing you, both of you, and I need you to trust that. Daniel kissed her then, deep and certain, pouring everything he couldn't say into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I trust you, and I'm sorry for not asking what you needed, for assuming this was all about me managing complications instead of us building something together. We're both learning. That's okay. They stood there in his kitchen, holding each other while the dishwasher hummed and the city lights twinkled through the window. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture or a dramatic declaration. It was just two people being honest about their fears and needs and hopes, choosing each other despite the complications. The holidays brought their own challenges and joys. Victoria joined them for Christmas morning, arriving after Emma had opened presents from her parents, but in time for the breakfast chaos and afternoon movie marathon. She brought thoughtful gifts that showed how well she'd been paying attention: a science kit for Emma's volcano obsession, a cooking class gift certificate for her and Daniel to take together, a framed photo of the three of them from the park that made Emma squeal with delight. New Year's Eve, they celebrated quietly, just the two of them after Emma had gone to bed, drinking champagne on Daniel's couch and talking about the year that had just passed and the one ahead. "A year ago, I was alone," Victoria said softly, "sitting in my apartment convincing myself I was fine. That success was enough. And now? Now I'm here, with you, building something I didn't know I wanted but can't imagine living without. No regrets? None. You." Daniel thought about the wedding where this had all started, about the moment Victoria had told him to stop looking at the bride and look at her instead, about every risk they'd taken and every challenge they'd navigated to get to this moment. No regrets, just gratitude that you were brave enough to say something, that you didn't let fear win. We both were brave, are brave. Every day we choose this, we're being brave. They kissed as the clock struck midnight, and Daniel felt the weight of the old year falling away, replaced by the promise of something new, something solid and real and worth every moment of uncertainty. January brought a new challenge when Catalyst Digital's board pushed for aggressive expansion that would require Victoria to travel extensively for the first quarter. She came to Daniel stressed and conflicted, torn between her professional responsibilities and her commitment to their relationship. "I don't know how to do both," she admitted over dinner. "They're talking about 3 weeks in Asia, 2 weeks in Europe, constant meetings and pitches and negotiations. The company needs this expansion, but I don't want to disappear on you and Emma right when we're building something real. So don't disappear. Go do what you need to do for the company, and we'll figure out how to stay connected while you're gone." Video calls with Emma. Late-night texts when time zones align. This doesn't have to be all or nothing. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's hard. But it's doable if we're both committed to making it work. Victoria left for Tokyo in mid-January, and the first few days were rough. Emma missed her, asking every night when Victoria would be home. Daniel missed her too. Missed her presence in his kitchen, her laugh, the way she folded herself into his couch like she belonged there. But they adapted. Victoria called Emma every morning before school, asking about homework and friends, and sharing stories about Tokyo that made his daughter's eyes widen with wonder. She texted Daniel throughout the day. Nothing profound, just small moments of connection that reminded him she was thinking about them even while closing million-dollar deals halfway around the world. "There's a temple here that Emma would love," she texted one afternoon. "All these paper cranes and wishes written on wooden plaques made me think about what I'd wish for." "What would you wish for?" he replied. "To be home, with you, building our life together." When Victoria returned 3 weeks later, exhausted and jet-lagged, Emma threw herself into her arms with the kind of enthusiastic hug reserved for people who mattered. And Daniel watched Victoria hold his daughter, saw the way her eyes closed with relief and belonging, and knew with absolute certainty that this was real, that she was in this completely. February brought Emma's dance recital, the one Sarah had given permission for Victoria to attend. They sat together, Daniel, Victoria, and Sarah, in uncomfortable auditorium seats watching 7-year-olds perform a ballet interpretation of woodland creatures. Emma was a butterfly, complete with wings that kept slipping down and nearly causing a collision with a deer. Afterward, Emma ran to all three of them, seeking praise and reassurance that she'd done well. And Daniel watched his daughter move seamlessly between her parents and Victoria, taking for granted that all three adults in her life would be there for important moments. It was what blended families were supposed to look like: messy and imperfect, but fundamentally functional. "She was perfect," Victoria said as they left the auditorium. "Even when her wings attacked that deer." "Especially when her wings attacked the deer," Sarah added with a laugh. "That was the most exciting part of the whole performance." They got ice cream to celebrate, the four of them sitting at a small table while Emma recounted every moment of the recital with the attention to detail of a Broadway critic. Sarah and Victoria fell into easy conversation about Emma's upcoming parent-teacher conference, coordinating schedules with the efficiency of people who'd learned to co-parent despite the complications. Later, after Sarah had taken Emma home, and Daniel and Victoria were alone in his apartment, she turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What would you think about moving in together?" she asked. The question should have terrified him, should have triggered all his carefully constructed defenses about protecting Emma's stability and not rushing into things and maintaining appropriate boundaries. Instead, what he felt was certainty. "I think we'd need to find a place that works for all of us. Somewhere with space for Emma's things in both her room and common areas. Somewhere that feels like home, not like she's a visitor in our space." Victoria smiled, relieved and happy. "So that's a yes?" "That's a yes, but we do it carefully. We involve Emma in the process. We make sure she understands this doesn't change her relationship with Sarah. We give her time to adjust." "Of course. All of that." They found an apartment in March, a 3-bedroom place with a park view and enough space for Emma's elaborate slime laboratory without taking over the entire living area. Emma was involved in every decision, from paint colors to furniture placement, making it clear this was her home too, not just a place she visited. The move happened in April, a chaotic weekend of boxes and furniture and Emma's excited supervision. Sarah helped, bringing over Emma's things from Daniel's old apartment and staying for pizza afterward. It was surreal and wonderful, watching his ex-wife and his girlfriend laugh together over Emma's insistence that the kitchen needed to be purple. "You've built something good here," Sarah told Daniel quietly, while Victoria and Emma argued about optimal slime storage solutions. "I'm happy for you, for all of you. Thank you for being okay with this, for making it easy." Emma's happy. You're happy. That's what matters. The rest is just details. Life settled into a new rhythm after the move. Victoria worked long hours but came home to family dinners and bedtime stories. Daniel continued to excel in his role at Catalyst Digital, earning respect through his work rather than his relationship. Emma adjusted to having more adults in her life who loved her, learning that families could be complicated and unconventional and still fundamentally solid. The gossip at work had long since faded, replaced by acceptance, and eventually forgetting that there had ever been a time when Victoria and Daniel weren't together. They'd become one of those office couples, the kind everyone knew about but nobody thought much about because they were professional and appropriate and clearly happy. One evening in late May, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel and Victoria sat on their balcony watching the city lights. Spring had fully arrived, bringing warmth and new growth and the sense of possibility that came with changing seasons. "Do you remember that wedding?" Victoria asked. "Where this all started?" "Of course. You told me to stop looking at the bride and look at you instead. I was so nervous saying that, so certain you'd think I was inappropriate or crossing a line or just making everything weird. I thought you were brave. Am I glad you were brave?" "Me too." She took his hand. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't said anything, if I just stayed silent and professional and safe. We would have just gone back to the office Monday morning and pretended that dance never happened, that conversation on the terrace never happened, that everything we felt was just wedding sentiment and too much wine. But you didn't stay silent." "No, I didn't, and it changed everything." Daniel pulled her closer, kissing her softly. "Best decision you ever made." "Second best," she corrected. "The best decision was when I chose to keep fighting for us. When I filed that disclosure form even though I was terrified. When I met Emma, even though I had no idea what I was doing. When I moved in here, even though it meant giving up my independence and my carefully controlled life. You didn't give it up. You just expanded it to include more people." "You're right. I did." She rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you. I know we don't say it enough because we're both guarded people who struggle with vulnerability. But I do. I love you. I love Emma. I love this complicated, messy, imperfect life we're building together. I love you too. Have for months, probably longer than I was willing to admit even to myself." They sat there as the sun set over the city, two people who'd found each other despite all the very good reasons why they shouldn't have. Two people who'd chosen to be brave enough to try for something real instead of settling for safe and lonely. Inside, Emma slept peacefully in her room, secure in the knowledge that she was loved by multiple people who'd figured out how to build a family despite the complications. Tomorrow, she'd wake up and demand galaxy slime for breakfast, and Victoria would laugh and negotiate down to pancakes with extra syrup, and Daniel would watch his two favorite people interact and feel grateful for every risk that had led to this moment. The office rumors had been wrong. This wasn't about power dynamics or career advancement or inappropriate workplace relationships. This was about two people who'd been lonely in different ways, who'd found each other at a wedding neither had wanted to attend, who'd been brave enough to say the quiet feelings out loud and see where they led. It had led here, to a balcony overlooking the city, to a shared life full of slime and spreadsheets and stolen moments of quiet connection, to a family that didn't look traditional but felt fundamentally right. Victoria's phone buzzed with an email, something about the European expansion, no doubt urgent and requiring her attention. She glanced at it, then silenced her phone and set it aside. "That can wait," she said. "This is more important." And Daniel knew in that moment that they were going to be okay. Not because everything would be easy or perfect or without challenges, but because they'd both learned what mattered most, because they'd chosen each other over and over in 1,000 small moments that added up to a life. The city hummed below them, full of other people's stories and other lives being lived. But this story, their story, had found its ending, or rather, its beginning, because this wasn't where things ended. This was where the real work began, the work of sustaining love through ordinary days and extraordinary challenges, the work of building a family that honored its complexity, the work of being brave enough to keep choosing each other, even when it would be easier not to. Daniel looked at Victoria, at this woman who'd changed his carefully controlled life in the best possible way, and felt certain about the future for the first time in years, certain that whatever came next, they'd face it together, certain that the risks they'd taken had been worth every moment of uncertainty, certain that sometimes the best things in life happened when you stopped looking at what was expected and started looking at what was possible. "Hey," he said softly. Victoria looked up. "Yeah? Thank you for seeing me that night, for being brave enough to say something, for not giving up on us when it got complicated." She smiled, soft and real and full of love. "Thank you for being worth the risk, for being exactly who you are, for building this with me." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky. Two people who'd found their way to each other through a combination of chance and choice and stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, love could still surprise you when you least expected it. Inside, Emma stirred in her sleep, dreaming of butterflies and slime and the certainty that she was loved. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to one small family's happiness. But for Daniel and Victoria, sitting on their balcony in the gathering darkness, the world had narrowed to just this moment, just this feeling, just the absolute knowledge that they'd found something rare and precious and worth protecting. They'd found home, not in a place, but in each other. And that was everything.